Hello guys, welcome to Soul Fiction. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto signed the Hellbound contract? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Ink That Burns. Konoha sleeps noisy, even when the lamps are out. The village hums. Old wood creaks in cramped houses. Crickets keep clattering time in the hedges, and somewhere a Jonin falls off a roof and swears softly about it. Naruto moves with the hum. A small shape and a big grin slipping along the backside of the administrative building where the stone turns dark with damp. He's out here because of a dare that started as a joke and got pointed at him like a knife. Mizuki had been smiling when he said it, pleasant as tea, you want to be Hokage. Retrieve a silly old scroll for me. It's probably a fake, but Iruka-sensei would be thrilled to see you studying. Right, Naruto understands jokes. He also understands when someone chuckles too hard at the wrong part. The grin he wears now is for the empty street. His thoughts are as quiet as he can make them, water moving under ice. He ducks past a leaning fence and into the narrow seam behind the archives, where the air has the heavy cold of old paper. He's cased this route for a week. No one suspects much when you fail tests loudly and spend your afternoons painting mustaches on monuments. Naruto has carved out a space in people's heads. Idiot prankster, attention starved. It has its uses. The grate at the bottom of the wall looks like it was fitted by someone who hated ladders. The bolts are sunk deep. The ribs of the bars are fat with rust. Naruto palms the metal, winces at the bite, and twists. It gives. He swears softly anyway. Things that give in Konoha usually cost somewhere else. The crawlspace smells like wet rope. He shimmies on elbows and knees until the tunnel flares into a round throat lined with black seals. Even with no training in sealing, he can feel the difference. Street signs talk, these sing. The characters are old Uzushio script, the kind that looks like whirlpools caught on paper. Naruto touches one with the knuckle of his little finger and feels his blood hum back, like a tuning fork eager to be struck. I should have brought a snack, he mutters to the stone. Should have brought a friend. He doesn't mean Mizuki. Behind him, a rat skitters. Ahead, something like a pulse nudges the air. He slides down the throat. His sandals hit a floor. The chamber opens like the inside of an egg, a perfect oval, its curve latticed with chains that aren't metal so much as shadow pretending to be. In the center is a stand of stone. On the stand is a narrow lacquer box. The box is bound in plain rope with a single knot. Naruto goes very still. No guards. No traps he can see. No helpful sign saying absolutely do not open if you are a reckless child with aspirations. The lack of drama is the loudest threat here. He straightens the goggles on his head. All right, he tells his heart, which is trying to escape his ribs by battering them flat. We're not poking it. We're not touching it. We're just looking. His hands don't believe a word of it. The rope is soft and strangely cool under his fingers. The knot comes apart like it was waiting for him to ask. He lifts the lid. Inside, a scroll sits wrapped in red silk, thin as a wrist bone. The paper is the kind of white that stains your eyes. There's a string of seals across it, the ink so black it seems to drink the light. There's also a coiled sensation, as if the room has been holding its breath and is now deciding whether to exhale or scream. Naruto slides the scroll free and rolls it open a palm's breadth. The characters ripple, not dance, not rearrange. They move with the gravity of tide. The marks pool and stretch. A pattern in them gazes back, not eyes but attention so focused it hurts. The air tastes of iron and something like burnt sugar. He's bitten his lip without realizing it. A drop of blood hits the parchment and vanishes, pulled through like water through sand. A sigil surfaces. Circles within circles, the inner one jagged as a broken halo. It's not a question, it's a place for a name to be written. The brush inside the box lifts of its own accord and hovers. Naruto steps back. The brush follows. Neat trick, he says, because his mouth always gets brave before the rest of him catches up. I also do balloon animals. Something shifts in the stone under his feet. Konoha hums. This chamber wakes. The chains on the walls flex and clink quietly, hungry metal sound without metal. Not in his head. Actual footsteps, the soft punch of weight on the tunnel floor above, not bothering to hide. Naruto's stomach knots. He moves to blow out the stubby candle he brought, but the light in the room doesn't come from the candle anymore. The ink is producing its own glow. A bruised purple that makes the edges of things too sharp. He hears voices in the crawlspace, low, purposeful. Should be straight down the throat. Old Uzushio rig. Easy, if we're first. If not first, dead. Another voice replies. They don't sound like Konoha shinobi. Their accents are polished smooth by travel. Their scabbards don't knock the walls. Professionals. Naruto's legs want to be running. He's halfway to the entrance when something thuds and someone yelps. Iruka's voice, raw with surprise and anger. You think I'm blind? Step away from the sound cuts off with a wet little cough. Naruto's blood moves without him. He stops feeling his feet lift. He's simply there at the crawlspace mouth, looking up at a man in a white half mask and 3 others who have Iruka pinned by the neck against the stone. His feet scrabbling. You must be the errand boy, the masked leader says, calm as a seminar. Bring down the scroll. Slowly, Naruto's vision narrows around Iruka's face. Iruka's mouth is trying to shape his name. Naruto starts, and his throat closes. He swallows. You hurt him, all. You'll do nothing but follow instructions, the man says, and tightens his fingers. Iruka's eyes roll. This is the part where Naruto throws himself at the problem and gets knocked into the wall and bleeds on the floor and maybe makes it worse. He feels that version like a tangent he's taken 100 times. He can even taste the dust. The chamber behind him widens. The scroll under his hand hums like a hive. His fingers brush the negative space where his name should go. I can give you the scroll, Naruto says, and feels his own voice steady, shoulders settling into a shape his body doesn't know it knows. I need 1 second. It's stuck. The leader flicks his fingers. One of the subordinates drops into the chamber, landing without a sound. The man's mask is blank, just a slit for eyes. He draws a knife. He doesn't look at Naruto. He looks at the scroll. Naruto doesn't step back. He looks down where his name would go. He sees the ink move toward him the way a dog leans into a hand. He thinks about getting laughed at in the classroom. He thinks about ramen warm and bright in a bowl. Iruka pushing it toward him with that dopey dad smile like there's nothing else it could be. There's no dramatic whisper. There's no bargain voiced aloud. Naruto's heart beats. He signs. The brush moves, and he moves with it, not controlling so much as agreeing. The ink that touches his skin is cold and then too hot, like ice melting on a bruise. His name burns into the scroll in a script he couldn't write if you paid him. The paper audibly sighs. Something like a door slams in the floor of the world. The masked subordinate lunges. Naruto's hand comes up. Flame pours out. Not orange, not red, but black threaded with violet, a hole burned into the air shaped like fire. The knife doesn't melt. It decides not to be here anymore and turns to ash in his grip. The man screams. The fire touches him without touching him. His mask falls off and his eyes show who he is when he's alone. Naruto sees fear, not for Naruto, but for the pain he doesn't mind inflicting. Someth. Ing in the flame drinks that and spits it back. The chamber explodes into motion. Chains writhe down from the walls and greet Naruto like old friends who owe him a favor. He doesn't tell them what to do. He just looks where he needs them. They go. Up at the crawlspace lip, the leader jerks Iruka forward as a shield and then, astonishingly, stops, as if recalculating. Naruto's fire licks and gutters, more intent than heat. Iruka's face is gray. Naruto tries to narrow the flame. It obeys, pulling back like a tide sucking water off a shore to bare the teeth of rock. Scroll, the leader says again, but it's softer now. Considering. What is your name? Naruto grins at him in a way that feels like he is ruining his own reputation and loving it. Uzumaki Naruto, he says, and the chains ripple like that's a joke they approve of. The subordinate at ground level recovers enough to draw a second knife. He takes half a step. One of the chains snakes up and loops around his ankle, casual as a garter, and then wrenches him sideways. He slams into the wall, breath going out in a moist grunt. Naruto doesn't rejoice. He's busy keeping the fire from eating the wrong thing. Let him go, Naruto tells the leader, nodding at Iruka. Walk away and, whatever you came for, it won't be worth this. That, the leader says, is where you're wrong, and makes a quick slicing gesture. The third masked man lashes Iruka's hands together with wire and sets a kunai at his back, right over the kidney. Small pressure. Naruto's fire flares of its own accord. Iruka hisses. The chain around the subordinate's ankle tightens until bone cracks. Naruto's vision blots around the edges. Okay, he whispers to the flame, to the ink, to whatever opened under his signature. Okay, not their skin, not his, just the parts that keep them standing. The flame shudders. It has language he can borrow. It's not a voice, exactly, it's a pressure, old as things that make vows. Judgment, it tells him, as if naming a tool. He remembers the exam room where they made him sit in silence and fail loudly so everyone would laugh and the proctors would nod because that was expected. He remembers Hinata glancing at him, ND dropping her eyes fast enough to pretend it didn't happen. Judgment, Naruto says. The black fire drops from his palms in a sheet as thin as paper and moves like 100 tiny tongues. It tastes the intent of the men on the lip of the crawlspace and strikes only at the bits that mean to kill, cuts at tendons, licks nerves. Both men cry out and go to a knee, their hands opening as if arguing with themselves. The kunai clatters and slides. Iruka slumps forward. He's breathing. The leader moves like resentment given muscle. He uses the sound of his men's pain to cover his own, throwing a set of steel wires that glint with poison in the purple light. They arc toward Naruto's face in a perfect curve. The chains are already awake. Two spring up and catch the wires on their bellies, bowing with the force, and fling them sideways. Another binds the leader's wrist and then his shoulder, then gives an eager yank. The man hits stone and doesn't get up immediately. Naruto is across the room and up the wall of the crawlspace before he knows it, obsidian fire licking his fingers like ink that wants to be a blade. If you touch him again, he tells the leader, and his voice is not big, but it is very steady. I will burn the part of you that likes it. I can do that now. I don't think you'd enjoy what's left. The leader looks at him properly for the first time. He's young, Naruto realizes, no older than a new Jonin. The eyes behind the half mask are very dark, very sharp, and for the first time uncertain. What did you sign? He asks, not the question of a man who understands seals in general, but of someone who knows he has intersected with a category of trouble his training did not cover. Naruto opens his mouth to say I don't know, but the word gets lost. He looks down at his hands. The flame has retreated to a purr. A heavy numbness is moving up his fingers, slow as syrup poured in winter. He feels as if he's been crying hard and then forgot he was. The leader makes a small, careful movement that speaks of calculation returning. He yanks his wrist taut against the chain and slices the rope binding it with a concealed blade. Naruto sees the twitch before his brain registers the trap. He throws his palms up. Fire gusts. The leader throws a smoke bomb. When the room clears, the crawlspace is empty. The subordinate with the broken ankle is gone too, dragged. There's blue on the lip and a thin smear that shows a body was hauled fast by someone who didn't care about corners. Damn it, Naruto whispers, and then realizes Iruka is on the floor of the tunnel, gasping, one hand clamped to his throat. Eyes bright with pain and tears. Naruto's stomach drops. He scrambles up, hands hovering. His palms feel dangerous. Don't talk. He's already rolling Iruka gently, 2 fingers at the pulse. It's there. Fast, but not ragged. He should run for a medic. He should. Iruka's eyes focus on him. They do that thing eyes do when you realize a joke and forgive it at once. He grabs Naruto's wrist. You stupid. Wonderful. His voice is shredded raw. He swallows, grimaces. What did you get yourself into this time? Naruto starts, and the numbness climbs to his wrist like frost. The world lists. He steadies with one hand on the stone. He can still feel the scroll down in the chamber, heavy as a promise. I lied, he says, breathless laugh punching out of him at the wrong time. Once. Just once. And it was to a piece of paper. Iruka looks like he wants to smile and cry and hit him gently with a chalkboard eraser. He tries to sit. Naruto pushes him back. Don't, Naruto says, trying to sound more serious than he feels, because if he doesn't aim the tone, he's going to fall apart. Wait here, I'll get help, I'll be fine. Iruka touches his wrist again, gentle, teach her steadiness. You just look at your hands. Naruto looks. The skin at the base of his thumbs is marked. Not burned. There's no blistering or char, but inked, almost, faintly. As if someone traced tally marks under his skin and then decided to hide them. He feels him breathe and the marks throb in answer, a bass percussion line under the beat of his pulse. He swallows. Huh, he says, because huh is safer than the way his heart is pitching. Weird. Iruka's mouth opens, closes. He shifts, winces. We're going to talk about this, he rasps. After the medic. After I don't feel like my neck is a bad instrument. Naruto. His voice gentles around the name, all the steadiness he never got from the village concentrated in it. You saved my life. You did good. The praise hits like he's been thirsty without noticing. Naruto nods too fast, knees buzzing. He helps Iruka up and out, and then, because he's not stupid, goes back to the stand and rewinds the scroll as best he can, tucks it under his jacket. He wraps the lacquer box roughly and shoves it into the space behind the stand, jamming it there where hands won't find it in a hurry. The room feels slightly annoyed about it, but the chains jingle like a dog's collar, tolerant. He leaves the way he came. The great checks his shoulders, then yields. Streets that felt loose and shared an hour ago have edges now like a map's borders. He gets Iruka to a medic and tells the truth in the messy way that is better than lying. Men with masks, a room that shouldn't exist, a scroll that signed him as much as he signed it. People move in the right directions. Iruka's voice comes back by increments. By dawn, there's a sickle of moon just starting to pale and Naruto is sitting on the roof of the academy, staring at his palms. The tally marks are clearer in the morning light. He rubs them. They don't go away. Stupid, he tells himself, because someone should get to say it before the day does. The wind comes past SME. Ling like frying oil from some vendor who didn't sleep. Naruto's stomach reacts with a loud complaint. He laughs and then sobers when the laugh hurts in a place you can't point to. Class starts, somehow. People fill seats. He slips into his usual one near the back and pretends not to notice how 3 students in the row ahead flinch when the door creaks. His fault in their heads, because strange things happen around Uzumaki Naruto. And it's easier to make it his choice than admit a world where it's not. Hinata sits 2 rows over, straight and quiet, hands folded so carefully they look like a prayer. When she glances his way, it's not like usual. Usually she looks for a second and then checks out of the moment with a flustered tilt. This time her gaze skims over him and stops. Her pupils dilate. A small O opens her mouth. Softer than breath. Naruto slouches theatrically and pulls a face as if he's already getting bored. He sees her hands tighten in her lap. The world tries to tilt around them. He stares studiously at the chalkboard. Iruka walks in as if his throat never met a hand. His voice is rough but steady. He asks questions. Naruto answers some he's not expected to, just to feel the way attention shifts when you surprise it. He throws answers sideways to other students who look lost. People glare at him less when he does that. It's a weird little experiment. He tucks that away. At break, Hinata drifts up beside him like a wisp of cloud that secretly has steel in it. Naruto-kun, she says, barely above a whisper. May I? He blinks. Sure. He's eating something that is either a rice ball or a brave interpretation of one. He swallows wrong and coughs. Smooth. She steps closer. Up close, Hinata has the kind of presence that doesn't demand space but ends up owning it anyway because of how carefully she inhabits it. Her eyes are very pale and very focused, and Naruto realizes with a small jolt that she's not looking at his face. She's looking through him, not in a ghost way but in a Hyuga way. The chakra around you, she says softly, apologetically, like she's bumping into something delicate. It's different today. New cologne, he says without thinking. He hates how it lands. And he hates that he loves hearing her almost laugh. She doesn't press the joke. May I? She asks again, hands hovering. I think there are marks. She sounds like someone trying not to trample on a secret she hasn't been invited to. Naruto flips his palms up. If you're going to curse me, at least buy me ramen after. he says, because jokes are safer than asking what do you see. Hinata's fingers don't touch him. They hover a finger width above his skin, precise and steady. With the Byakugan active, her veins stand out faintly at her temples like ink lines. Her breath hitches. They're tallies, she whispers. But they're not on your skin. They're in the flow of your chakra network. Like, she shakes her head, a quick refusal of words that fail. He tries to play it off. He ends up sounding like he's practicing being calm. Got into something I shouldn't, he says. It's okay. Her eyes flick up to his. The look there is a mix he thinks only someone soft-spoken can pull off, worry that doesn't lecture. Intensity that never accuses. Is it? She asks. Do you hurt? He reaches for the easy lie because he doesn't want any part of her to dim. Nah. The syllable L ends and something like a pinprick snaps along the inside of his wrists, quick and precise. Hinata flinches like she heard it too. Naruto stares at his hands. There's another little line under the ski. And that wasn't there moments before, so faint he'd miss it if he hadn't been watching with impossible attention because Hinata is. He looks back at her. She doesn't look away. That, she says, tone kind but not soft, happened when you said nah. He wants to object. He is very much comforted by the possibility that he's being teased. Hinata's expression makes that a stupid road to take. Naruto breathes out. It stings when I make things easier than they are, he admits. He doesn't mean it to sound like that. It does anyway. He smiles without teeth. Weird, right? Not weird, she says. Just costly. He has a dozen replies built out of bravado and banter. None of them fit. The way she stands beside him, neither hovering nor retreating, feels like an answer to a question he didn't know he was asking. Don't tell Iruka, he blurts, and then wants to slam his head into the wall for picking the wrong sentence. I mean, he has enough to, he doesn't. I won't, she says immediately. Unless you're in danger. He thinks of the ink sighing and the chains eager to oblige. He thinks of a hand closing on someone's throat. I'm always in danger, he says, and then flinches, waiting for the sting. It doesn't come. Honesty and he have never been what you'd call tight, but sometimes they shake hands. Hinata's mouth makes a soft line. Then, she says, surprising herself as much as him, let me stand with you. When I can see the marks. Maybe I can help keep them from, she doesn't finish. He imagines words like multiplying and devouring. He imagines her saying them and refuses the picture. He nods. They both end up pretending they didn't just make a small pact in a hallway with chalk dust in the air. If the morning had ended there, Naruto might have made it through the day pretending he dreamed the ink. But Konoha doesn't let the big choices be the last dramatic thing that happens. It throws small ones like stones to see if you trip. Training is after lunch. Iruka doesn't. Go hard. His voice gives out around halfway through, and he turns it over to a Chunin substitute who runs them through obstacle drills. Naruto moves like he's wearing a new suit that he doesn't want to scuff yet. He doesn't light anything on fire. On purpose. They're running palm strikes against a padded target when a senior kunoichi in a tan trench coat and fishnet pauses in the archway like she am. To walk past and changed her mind at the smell of a particular spice. Mitarashi Anko leans one shoulder against the doorframe and watches the room with flat amusement. The Chunin instructor stiffens almost invisibly. Carry on, Anko says. She makes it a suggestion and a dare. She doesn't watch long. Naruto knows because he feels it when attention glues itself to him. He makes the next strike too hard and the pad holder yelps. Naruto apologizes, easy, hands spread. When he turns back, Anko is in front of him without bothering to explain her movement with body mechanics that obey polite physics. You, she says, come with me. Naruto considers refusing on principle. He doesn't know which principle would be satisfied by that. He goes. The Chunin looks relieved. Anko looks hungry like a bored cat that's found a mouse who might be a bad idea. She doesn't take him to interrogation. She takes him to the training ground behind the admin building where the trees have scars and the dust has a taste of old lightning. She stops in the shade and faces him, hands behind her back, eyes resting heavy on his face and then, deliberately, on his hands. You smell like a curse, she says conversationally. But not one I've met. How attached are you to your skin? Naruto's mouth builds a joke that dies at the door because of the look in her eyes. On a scale of 1 to very, very good, Anko says, me too. I prefer when people keep the same number of holes they started with. Tell me what you did. He shifts the weight between his feet, not fidgeting, fixing angles. Found a scroll. Signed something. Saved my teacher. Didn't kill anyone. It's mostly true. He watches for the sting. It doesn't come. Something else does. A tiny surge of warmth under the marks that is not approval exactly. It's conceding a point in an argument. He files that sensation under things to think about when not being stared at by a snake-kissed Jonin. Anko's mouth makes an interested little half-smile. Oh, she says softly. You did sign something. Her tongue touches the back of her teeth like she's tasting the air. You poor, lucky brat. Show me your hands. He shows her. She doesn't touch. She leans in until her hair shadow falls across his skin and the casings of the tally marks gleam. That's not Orochimaru's flavor, she says, and Naruto pretends those words don't land like a thrown knife. And it's not ink alone. It's judicial. Huh. She slants him a look that is half protective instinct and half professional curiosity sharpened on the wheel of 100 bad decisions. Tell me you didn't promise anything without reading it. Quote, I don't read, he says deadpan. He waits for the scold. It doesn't come. Anko barks a laugh that has real humor in it. Honest. Dangerous. She straightens. Listen, I'm not your keeper. I don't want to be. But if something tries to eat you from the inside out, I want to be the one to put a boot on its neck because it'll make my week. Consider me on call. Her tone makes on call sound like an invitation to step into a ring where the ropes burn. Naruto's shoulders settle in something that feels like gratitude disguised as swagger. And in return, he asks, you don't squeal about me eating dango for breakfast, she says solemnly. And if you decide to tear the sky in half, give me a heads up so I can get the good knives. Naruto grins. Deal. Good. Anko's eyes dip past him to the path into the village. Her lips tuck into her cheek. Also, she adds in the same light tone, there are men in town who don't smell like any of ours. They're shiny on the inside. Sunsteel. She says the word like she'd prefer it as something to throw at someone's head. If anyone in robes with that metal tries to chat, run, scream, or kill them in that order. Shouldn't I ask nicely what they want? Naruto says, reflexive, and the prickle under his skin testifies with a dry that would be a lie. He grimaces. Kidding. I know, Anko says. That's what worries me. He's on his way back through the village when the test comes. Not high stakes, not a sign lit in the sky, just a little alley where the shade pool's thrown by an old tea shop, and 3 older beaux. YS bracketing a lanky kid against a wall. The kid's jacket is too big and his eyes are glassy. Naruto doesn't need the Byakugan to see the purple thread of poison down the kid's wrist where a tiny wound hides in the sleeve. Hey, Naruto says, stepping into the alley with his hands out. If this is a line for free tea, I want a token. If it's not, I still want a token. The 3 turn. Their leader has a face that wants to be smarter. It's weighed down by the effort of trying. Get out, he says, braced to enjoy the push. Can't, Naruto says cheerfully. I live here. He tips his chin at the kid against the wall. He doesn't look good. He owes, the leader says, which is the sentence men use when they want to make someone else responsible for the hole they're in. The kid's breathing is shallow and fast. There's sweat at his hairline that shouldn't be there in the cool. Naruto knows 2 things at once. He could end this by breaking 3 faces hard enough they slosh. He could also something worse happen later if he chooses the wrong kind of victory. He's already spilling at the edges with newness. His hands decide before he finishes the thought. Okay, he says, all brightness drained to a steady, ordinary tone. He steps closer to the kid and lifts his hands a little like he's asking to put them on a dog who's not sure of him yet. I'm going to help. Then we can talk about owing. The leader snorts. Help how? Pray at him. Sure. Naruto says. Close enough. He doesn't pray. He opens. The feeling is like prying apart 2 boards that have been nailed together for a decade. He puts a fingertip, just one. Because anything more feels like smashing a door for a mouse, near the wound under the jacket and thinks gate without knowing that's the right word. The space in F. Ront of his finger puckers like water around a dropped stone. Cold breathes through it. The poison is a thin, stubborn thread. It wants to unmake small things. Naruto coaxes it with a kind of coaxing he's never used, patient and merciless. The thread wriggles free and tries to snap back. He grips it with something not a hand and pulls. It peels like the stringy white pith from an orange. He hates that the metaphor helps. The kid shudders and then sags, eyes rolling up. Naruto pulls the last of the thread through the gate and, because he's not a monster, shuts the gate on the other side. He doesn't throw the poison down. He puts it somewhere he doesn't have words for that tastes like stone and old rules. The gate closes with a tiny click he feels in his bone. He's shaking. His hands are numb up to the first knuckle. He breathes out through his teeth and grins at the leader because he needs to be an idiot again for 2 sentences or he's going to embarrass himself by swaying like a grandma. There, he says. Service fee waived if you stop extorting kids. The leader's expression twists as every plan he had for using the kid as leverage melts like knock-off candy in summer. He jabs a finger at Naruto. This isn't your. Naruto shifts his weight. Not threatening. Not loud. He meets the guy's eyes and lets the part of him that stood in a room with black fire and decided who he was leak out a little. It's not chakra. It's choice. I know, he says. Now it's ours. Go home. The boys go. One tries to shoulder check him on the way past. Naruto leans just enough to suggest the wall whoa. I'd appreciate not being introduced to a skull today, thanks. The kid against the wall exhales like someone underwater finding air. Naruto crouches to look him in the face. You're dumb, he informs him. Don't do that again. The kid nods very vigorously, which Naruto chalks up to relief rather than comprehension. He helps him to the mouth of the alley and sits him where the tea shop owner can see. The woman inside clocks Naruto and the kid in the alley in one glance and comes with a tray without making a fuss. He loves Konoha desperately in those little s, the way the village pretends not to see in order to see better. He's finishing his tea and considering whether numb fingers would make throwing knives safer or not when the light changes. It's subtle, the way the temperature drops handful of degrees and the sun loses a sliver of warmth it didn't have permission to. Naruto looks up. People in the street slow, some without understanding why. He feels the hairs on his forearms lift. Enko walks into the street like she's been called by her middle name. Her head tilts. Her eyes narrow. She looks up too. At the juncture where 3 roads meet, above the fountain with the mossy turtle, light gathers. Not like chakra. Chakra makes space vibrate with potential, heat and sound. This is colder than a rule written in a law book. Lines appear in the air, delicate and dead pale, and then burn with a white that isn't a color. They form a circle the size of a house roof. Inside the circle, writing etches itself, crisp and spare. Naruto can't read it, but he knows from the way his marks shiver that it's not meant for him. It's meant for people who believe things should stand still. The circle descends until it hovers just above the fountain. A few leaves that had been spinning in the air freeze mid-tumble inside it. As if the circle has politely requested they pause while it exists. The writing finishes. The light hardens. Enko breathes out. The sound is between amusement and a growl. Sunsteel Ward, she says to no one and to everyone. Well, aren't you a church bell? What does it say? Naruto asks, stepping in beside her, because he can pretend he wasn't going to do that but he was. And Hinata is suddenly at his other side without making any noise, eyes wide open in a way that makes the day more vivid. Enko's tongue curls against her teeth like she's reading with taste. Deliver the Hellbound, she translates, voice dry, or be purified. People in the street pretend those are just words. It's impressive, how fast villagers get good at pretending. Enko adds, gaze ticking across the rooftops. They hung it over a water source. That's cute. What do we do? Naruto asks. His palms itch. The marks under his skin hum with a wariness that feels like a dog bristling before the doorbell rings. Enko smiles wide in a way that would worry a sensible god. We don't do anything loud, she says. Yet, we let the adults pretend they can make this a meeting. Her grin tightens down to humorless. And then, if anyone comes looking for a boy with ink on his bones, we close the door on their fingers and talk about their god with knives. Hinata doesn't speak. Her Byakugan is on without flourish. Naruto can feel the froth of chakra at the edge of his skin where it touches the idea of the ward, the way a cat feels when it tries to walk past a balloon that's a little too still. He looks at the white circle, at its neat writing that makes villagers pretend they didn't see a threat. His throat is dry, his tongue feels heavy with the taste of iron and burnt sugar again. He laughs once, sharp and without humor. "I hate signs," he says. Enko's shoulder bumps his. "Me too," she says. "Good news. Paper burns." He can feel the line press against a choice he hasn't spelled yet. Hide, run, swagger. Ask for help. He looks at Hinata, at how she stands with both feet planted and her hands not trembling. He looks at Anko, whose grin is a weapon and a promise. He thinks about Iruka's voice. Shredded but steady. He thinks about a scroll that signed his name back at him with a shape that taught him what he must become to survive it. "Good," he echoes, too soft for anyone but the two of them to hear. "Then we'll bring water." Anko snorts, delighted, because it's a complicated answer that sounds dumb to anyone who didn't hear the room made of ink purr under their bones. The circle hangs and gleams and says what it says. The village pretends and rearranges and buys bread and sharpens knives. Somewhere very near and very far, men with polished accents feel sure they've rung a bell. They will come. Naruto rolls his shoulders and feels the tallies purr like caged heat. The numbness has crept down, his fingers tingle, almost normal, almost buzzing. He stands without flinching, because the easiest lies are not worth the sting and the truth tastes like metal and a grin. "All right," he says to the day, to the ward, to the choice he keeps making. Let's see if fire can learn manners. Chapter 1 end. Chapter 2. Forest of Teeth and Whispers. The written exam isn't hard in the way people expect. It's a room full of minds trying to be alone in a place designed to punish loneliness. Naruto sits 2 rows from the back, half turned in his chair as if committed to failure by posture alone, and drums a rhythm with his knuckles against the desk that means nothing. Ing if you're not listening and everything if you are. Hinata is listening. Her eyes are down, her Byakugan a faint shiver under the skin at her temples. 5 beats. Check left. 2. Right. A clipped triplet. Pause, Proctor looking. It isn't cheating the way the Proctors think. It's choreography. Lines of sight intersecting, glances held for a breath, letting the world be porous where it wants to be solid. He's not feeding answers to strangers. He's weaving moments where people can help themselves. On the 3rd page, he catches a kid 3 rows up, pale, jaw tight, with a pen hovering uselessly over. A question about resource distribution during a siege. Naruto taps twice, fast, then 3 slow. The kid breathes, shifts his angle, sees the problem from the side he was allowed to have. His shoulders drop. Iruka watches from the proctor's corner, throat still roughened, eyes suspiciously bright when Naruto pretends not to see him. Naruto's ink marks hum under his skin like a struck string. And he lies to himself. "I'm not helping anyone, I'm just bored." The tiniest pinpricks flicker along his wrists. He laughs silently and stops lying. When they collect the papers, someone in front mutters, "Idiot got lucky." Naruto wipes chalk dust from his hands he doesn't have and decides that luck is what people call teamwork when they weren't invited. They file out into the light and the noise of the waiting crowds. Enko whips a dango stick at his head from 20 paces. He snatches it without looking and takes a bite. She smirks. Hinata fails to hide a smile that could mend torn cloth. On the way to the 2nd stage briefing, Naruto drifts close enough to Hinata to feel the steady warmth she gives off when she's thinking hard. "Nice eyes," he says, which is nothing and something. "Thanks." She blinks. "For eyes. For not letting me run into a wall when I was walking like a wall should move," he says. She doesn't laugh, but relief loosens her shoulders. It's going to be a day where Peo choose to be useful without needing permission. The forest of death smells like unwashed green and old storms. The fence is high and barbed and unnecessary, the forest is its own fence. Proctors hand out consent forms like jokes. Naruto scrawls his name and feels his mark ink twitch under the skin, noting the act of agreement without interest. He palms the heavenward sunsteel warning that so. Me old woman taped to the fence in a shaky hand, deliver the Hellbound, or be purified, and eats it like a piece of bad paper. Anko sees that, tips a salute with the butt of a senbon. "Spicy," She calls. Chase it with water. Teams gather, whispering and plotting. Kiba bounces. Puppy energy barely contained. Shino's quiet is decisive. Sakura runs a brush through her hair like war paint. Shikamaru low. Oaks like a nap would be better policy than whatever this is. Naruto looks for Hinata and finds her before he knows he's looking. She's adjusting her Hitai-8 with careful fingers, gaze roving. When it meets his, he nods. She nods back. No declarations. A line drawn in air will do. The gates open. The forest eats them. They move. He moves with whoever needs one more body in a pinch. It isn't a betrayal of Team 7. It's Naruto's preferred geography. Wherever the floor is going to drop out. Twice he doubles back to throw off a tale by talking loudly about lunch until a scout impatiently shows themselves. Once, he opens a thumbnail gate in a puddle and shunts a neck leech into a pocket of cold that smells like inkstone and bad bargaining, then shuts it gently so the leech doesn't get ideas about coming back with friends. It's a forest, and then it isn't. One moment they're working problems. Food, traps, the way shadows tilt too far in one direction. The next, the air flexes around them. Like lungs stop and too much of nothing rushes in. Birds go so quiet the silence has a tone. Naruto's marks burn cold. The killing intent hits like bad gravity. It isn't sound. It's pressure, the way a room feels just before something heavy drops. Sakura flinches hard enough to catch herself on a trunk. Sasuke's jaw goes reflex. Even Shino takes a half step like calibrating the new weight of the air. Hinata's hands twitch near her chest, not fear, not exactly, positioning for a strike that stabilizes rather than harms. Smart. Good. You feel that? Kiba asks, pretending his voice isn't trying to be 2 sizes bigger than it is. No, Naruto says honestly, because you don't feel a tidal wave. You are in it or you aren't. His ink marks ring a soft alarm up his arms. He tastes copper. A shape D. Wraps through the canopy so smoothly his brain wants to put him there already. Pale face, hair like ink that refuses to be polite, eyes that are hunger as an academic exercise. Orochimaru lands with the silence of a secret being told to itself. Enko is already moving, avatar of a promise she made to her younger self. She hits the clearing's edge like she was always there, a grin bearing too many teeth, Senbon-like punctuation. Sensei. She says. The word is affectionate as poison. Orochimaru's smile tilts. Enko. He says as if sampling a wine he bottled years ago. You smell different. Dirt, blood, and regret, Enko says. I learned to cook. Naruto is not the center of this conversation and is very aware he might be the center of someone else's plan. He takes one step toward Hinata and one toward the open space where someone unnoticed could flank. His fire does not like Orochimaru. It wants to be teeth. He wants to be something else. Orochimaru tilts his head, not at Enko now, but past her. Gaze catching like a fishhook on Naruto. The corners of his mouth make the wrong shape, admiration laid on a cutting board. And what are you? He asks Naruto, just as conversationally as if he were in a tea shop and not under a canopy that remembers screaming. Naruto could say nothing. He could make a joke and force the moment to blink. He does neither. He meets the gaze. Busy, he says. The tallies under his skin flare. The flame at his hands wants to come. Not heat. Judgment. He breathes out. He doesn't burn. Not yet. The attack comes not from Orochimaru but from the forest itself, a wall of vipers. A gust of jutsu that tastes like molting, a pair of pale clones moving to split Hinata and Naruto by force. Enko is a streak, intercepting one clone mid-stride, her kunai biting air where it becomes throat. She twists, snarls. The clone deflates into snakes. She laughs out loud, delighted and furious. You're predictable, she informs a man whose unpredictability is religion. The other clone is too fast for a safe hit. Naruto doesn't have time to think. He opens his palm. The ink under his skin aligns. The verdict brand crawls up his forearm like frost in black. He slashes the air. The brand leaves a mark that's not on skin or tree. The clone runs through it and staggers like it hit its own name. Naruto sees it. Orochimaru as he is to himself. A house made of mold, every wall. A skin he left because it fit too well. Hunger with a library card. It's not a vision. It's a grammar lesson for intent. The brand offers options. They are sharp and very simple. Cut this now. Burn this out. Remove the part that keeps wanting. He could. If he does, his tally marks will bloom like early frost on a field. If he does, Anko will watch his back and never forgive him for doing her favorite thing without her permission. Not my choice, Naruto tells the brand, steady. Not here. Not like this. He twists his wrist. The brand doesn't punish him for restraint, it accepts a different operation. The black mark reverberates through the clearing like a whisper that stings. The clone shudders apart on its own, snakes taking separate paths like thoughts giving up. Orochimaru's eyebrows rise. For the first time, the hunger is interested and not merely appraising. Ah, he says softly, almost delighted. A contract. Yours is overdue, Anko says, leaving a line of blood along his sea. Heat that might be his or might be the forest's. Hey, they move too fast for narrative. Anko and Orochimaru speak with metal and old intimacy. Naruto holds the line that would become a split between people who don't deserve dying today. Hinata's hands are a quiet flurry, closing pathways, stabilizing flares in Naruto's marks when they spike toward bad decisions. Once, she touches his chest with tea. He heel of her palm so precisely he swears she anchors the part of him that wants to run as much as the part that wants to burn. He breathes because she tells his body to. And then, just as suddenly as it started, the pressure lifts. Orochimaru laughs the way people laugh at gravity from a comfortable distance and slips back into the trees, not retreating so much as continuing a plan he never really paused. Anko breathes hard through her nose, blade low. She looks at Naruto with the eyes of someone assessing a weapon she would rather be a boy. Don't kill anyone to impress me, she says lightly. Which is the kindest thing she knows how to tell him. Save the show for people who deserve it. Copy, Naruto says, and his marks hum with agreement that costs nothing. They don't get a rest. The forest doesn't respect scenes. It pours problems in. The next doesn't smell like snakes. It smells like polished metal and scripture read aloud until it becomes a trick of light. White-robed bodies move between trunks, quick and precise. Not shinobi, not priests, sanctifiers. Their armor isn't armor, it's etching given weight. They carry lengths of sunsteel inscribed with neat, smug lines. The air around them is unnaturally crisp, as if they are constantly removing what doesn't fit in their picture. The leader, a woman with hair cut to the bone and an expression creased by a lifetime of certainty, lifts her rod. By mandate, she calls, voice traveling too well. Deliver the pact bearer. Deliver yourself to a personality, Anko mutters. The sanctifiers. Formation is good. 6 with rods, 3 with lattices not yet unfolded. Naruto's skin crawls. The tallies hurt like biting his tongue. Sunsteel is not simply metal, it's a handwriting that tells the air what it is and isn't allowed to contain. His flame is something air learns to hold. Back, Hinata says quietly, not to retreat but to adjust the angle. Naruto steps. The world tilts to a more survivable pitch. The first lattice crack. KS open like a lantern and unfolds into a pale architecture of rules. Naruto feels it when his flame stutters, not snuffed, but put on probation. He doesn't wait to feel helpless. He throws a chain. It bites a rod and wraps it. Sunsteel hissing like fat in a pan. The smell is ugly. The sanctifier tries to wrench free, eyes widening at the wrongness of being touched by nothing of this world. Here's a new rule, Naruto says. Because talking is a weapon too when you aim it. Stop. The chain stops, for a heartbeat, abruptly obedient. He laughs, surprised at his own audacity. The chain shakes itself, like a dog that just learned it can sit. The sanctifier uses the breath to cut free, stern mouth going harder. The lattice sweeps toward Hinata's open guard. A sound interrupts that isn't a sound so much as a complaint. It is canine and offended and radiates the authority of a creature late for a nap because the house is on fire again. A small, shaggy hellhound shoulder checks reality and appears at Naruto's knee. Ears like torn banners, eyes bright with dramatized weariness. He is not impressive in the way artists draw hounds of hell. He is impressive in the way a kettle is when you are cold. About time, he tells Naruto with a voice that is teeth wrapped in felt. You signed the line and didn't read the pet clause. Naruto stares. I get a dog. I get a child, the dog says flatly. We all suffer. He bares his teeth at the lattice. Sit. The lattice sits. To be precise, it crumples a little like someone reminded it gravity exists for laws, too. Hinata's strike lands in the hole it makes. Precise flicks that don't break the thing so much as invite it to stop pretending. The lattice flickers, confused by the existence of being asked nicely. It dissolves reluctantly. The Hellbound looks very pleased with himself and then pretends not to. Garm, he says, not offering a paw. I hate snacks unless you have dried anchovies. If you do, I am your servant forever for as long as it takes me to eat them. Naruto, mid-fight, finds himself grinning like an idiot. I can get anchovies. You can get alive if you stop daydreaming, Garm says, and launches himself at a sanctifier's ankle. Which is apparently enough to convince the man to revisit his belief in holiness. The sanctifiers adjust. Professionals. 2 pivot to tiered script, words sliding over words in a way that creates a slick floor for wrongness to stand on. A second lattice blooms, then a third, overlapping like careful fences. A blade of wind cuts the first in half. Who thought it was a good idea to build a church in the middle of a public forest? Tamari strolls into the clearing, fan tucked behind her shoulder, expression carved out of patient disdain. She takes in the formation, the lattice, the dog. Her mouth quirks. Cute. Diplomatic incident incoming, Anko sings, because she has never met a border she didn't lick to see what it was made of. Tamari glances at her and then at Naruto, counting Is marks the way Hinata does but with a tactician math, not a healer's. You're the reason the paper crane was screaming, she says, as if checking a note. Fine, I'm borrowing your chaos, return it in better condition. Naruto says before he can stop himself. I do returns with interest, Tamari says dryly, and snaps the fan open. Her first gust isn't about power. It's about angle. She shepherds air into the joints of the lattices. Not to break them but to make them complain. The Sunsteel rules don't like complaining, they prefer to be adored. While they sulk, Naruto's chains thread through gaps and yank rods into each other. Clanging like bells. Garm harries ankles, triumphant and noisy. Hinata maps stress lines with Byakugan, tapping Naruto's wrist twice when his flame flares wrong. And once when a sanctifier's posture says aim here. Anko's Senbon find that posture and underline it. The sanctifiers keep moving, quick and crisp, their confidence peeling like paint in spring. The Eater woman barks a command in a language built out of refusal. The lattices snap together into a single, larger architecture, the serif lattice Anko warned about, the kind with fewer joints and more arrogance. It rolls toward them like the first paragraph of a sermon. Naruto does not try to burn it. He throws a chain into the ground instead. It bites. He throws another into a tree. He keeps throwing until a web exists that isn't a trap but a grid. The lattice hits the grid and slows, confused by a geometry that doesn't respect it. Tamari reads the angle in a glance, smiles like knives being oiled. And scythes wind into the slowed face of it. The lattice shears. It knits. It doesn't like bleeding. It likes this less. Again, she says. Again, Naruto says. They do it again. The lattice gives up and comes apart all in a rush. Like the moment a liar realizes everyone else was in on the joke. The sanctifiers fall back 2 steps, then 3. The leader woman lifts her rod and speaks a calm Mon that isn't retreat so much as reprioritize. Her gaze fixes on Naruto with the worshipful hatred of a bureaucrat faced with a child who has found a shortcut and won't stop smiling. We will purify, she promises. Which she thinks is kindness. Get in line, Anko says cheerfully. The sanctifiers melt back into the trees, neat even about fleeing. The white geometry of their intent lingers like a chalk outline. Naruto's hands shake. Garm bites a twig, spits it, looks at Naruto. Anchovies, he says. We won. I get anchovies. You were magnificent, Hinata tells the dog solemnly, which is the right answer. Garm preens until remembering he does not preen. Tamari closes her fan and leans on it like a staff, taking Naruto's measure with the casual rudeness of someone too competent to pretend she isn't. If you're planning to die, tell me now, she says. Suna prefers to schedule grief. Not on the calendar today, Naruto says. His chest feels scraped raw in the best way, used, not broken. He wipes his palms on his pants. The tallies under his skin itch less. When he glances at Hinata, she gives him a small nod. Yes, you didn't overpay. Temari's eyes flick to Hinata, take in their wordless accounting. And file it somewhere. She keeps maps and secrets. Good, she says, because I'm going to need you to hold a corner of the sky later. Okay, Naruto says, because some sentences are easier to accept than parse. You in charge, I'm in the room, Temari says. Usually enough. They move as a loose pack after that, Enko scouting like a rumor, Temari shaping wind to hide their noise. Hinata and Naruto a moving two-point circuit stabilizing each other's foolishness. Garm alternates between caustic commentary and very loud yawns. Twice, Sanctifiers test their perimeter and find it unpleasant. Once, a Genin team tries their luck and decides immediately that luck is for other days. By the time they make the tower, the forest has the sulky air of a creature denied a proper meal. The tower rises like a game board piece someone forgot to put away. Inside, proctors with tired eyes tick names off lists. The air smells like old rice and victory anxiety. Boards display match brackets forming themselves with tiny clacks. The prelims will be public. Pain likes an audience. Word has moved faster than they did. People talk in the sideways way villagers do when they want to make a safer story of something true. Hellbound. Purification. Paper bell above the fountain. Nobody says Naruto's name. Everybody looks at him and looks away. He rolls a shoulder and lets it slide. Garm hops onto a bench, curls into a judgmental ball, and pretends to nap with his eyes open. Temari wanders off to injure someone with politeness. Enko vanishes so completely Naruto wonders whether she left the building or the concept of being indoors. The brackets finish their clacking. Names pair with names. Naruto doesn't care who he fights. He cares about keeping the marks under his skin from tasting. The idea of show when what he wants is proof. Fights blur and sharpen in turns. Konkuro's puppets move like arguments in a marriage that nobody's winning. Rock Lee flies and crashes and stands in a way that makes Naruto want to build a shrine to stubbornness and then set it on fire when it gets smug. Temari dissects an opponent by taking away options until breathing feels like a choice they didn't earn. Hinata's match comes and Naruto forgets to build a joke to breathe. Her opponent is bigger and louder and convinced the world owes him space because he can fill it. He charges like he's been paid by the meter. Hinata's feet barely move. She lets him come to where her hands will be. She is soft, which is to say she knows exactly how much force is required to be kind. 10 strikes, precise as a mother's scold. His chakra network stutters, confused that a lullaby can break its nose. He staggers, tries to rally on habit alone, and finds that habit requires fuel he no longer has. She lowers him gently to a defeat he can keep his dignity inside. Naruto doesn't notice he's smiling until Garm sneezes and calls him sentimental. He doesn't deny it. He looks at Hinata when she steps off the floor. She sees him seeing and flushes in a way that looks like pride borrowing the color of embarrassment for cover. Naruto's match is next. The opponent is a lean boy with blade-quick hands and a street rated G that looks like a list. Keep distance, test reach, punish overcommitment. Sensible. Naruto could win ugly with flame. He decides to win honestly and a little stupid. Begin, the proctor says. Naruto doesn't move for a breath. He feels for his flame and feels for the place where trying to impress becomes trying to be someone he's not. He doesn't like the taste of it. He breathes. The room narrows. The boy faints left. Naruto steps right not to avoid but to meet, hand already moving to catch wrist, to turn that blade quick into an angle he can break. They trade. Naruto is sloppy at first on purpose, leaving a hole that invites a thrust. The boy takes it. Naruto closes around it, shoulder to shoulder, hip to hip, empties the ground under the boy's feet with a twist that would be ugly if he did it with malice. He doesn't. He does it like a dance move he learned from the floor. The boy hits mat, flips, recovers with a flush that's half thrill, half pride stung. He comes again. Naruto's flame tugs at him, eager to adjudicate. He doesn't need it. He uses chains once, not to bind but to touch. A flick that taps the boy's knee just off true, a correction more than a punishment. The boy blinks, recalibrates last second, lands better because Naruto asked him to. They both grin, breathing hard. Fight. not flirt, Garm mutters, but his tail ticks once. Hinata watches with hands lightly fisted against her chest. Ready to steady. Naruto can feel her attention like a net that catches him if he overreach. The boy tries a rescue technique. Flash bang, smoke, slash. Naruto leans into the smoke, closes his eyes. Hears the footfall inside the noise, steps into it. He doesn't hit. He places a palm against the boy's sternum, a gentle 2-inch push. The effect is ridiculous. The boy's breath stops like a door caught by a shoe. His will falters. Naruto follows through with a sweep that sets the boy down. The proctor's hand cuts the air. Winner. Uzumaki Naruto. There is polite cheering. There is less polite muttering. Naruto doesn't bow deeply. He nods like he's admitted into a conversation he intends to be loud in. When he turns, his marks lurch, a new sting, a flutter, not a strike. He almost misses the source until Hinata is in front of him, eyes wide, hand moving with a certainty she usually saves for turning her own fear into a tool. She presses her palm to the center of his chest. Not hard, not long. It feels like someone remembered to put a beam under a sagging roof. The marks don't flare, they settle. The crowd makes noise it doesn't understand it's making. Touch eye, and the arena is red as everything it is and 5 things it isn't. Naruto doesn't care. He breathes and finds the floor under his feet is less likely to betray him. Sorry, Hinata whispers, color flying to her cheeks. It was spiking. Thanks, he says, more vivid than he means to be. It isn't gratitude like a favor. It's relief like being allowed to be complicated in public. The room shifts around them. A murmur rolls through the stands. Enko appears on a railing with no regard for gravity, eyes flat. Tamari steps closer without looking like she does. Garm's head comes up. Light gathers above the arena. Not heat, not fun. The Sunsteel Edict writes itself in the air with the tidy brutality of a ledger. Deliver the Hellbound or be purified. It hangs there like a god put a sticky note on their day. People pretend not to understand for a breath and then begin to understand in ways that are worse. The proctors look at the judges look at the door as if an answer will walk through with a stamp and a receipt. Naruto stands very still. Hinata's hand leaves his chest and finds his sleeve, not clutching so much as indicating presence. The edict's letters sharpen. They emit a su. ND too high to be hearing and too low to be politely ignored. Garm growls. Church bells in my house, he says. Rude. Tamari unfolds her fan one rib. Her gaze tracks wind patterns that don't exist yet. Pick a hill, she says quietly. You're going to fight on it. Enko flips a senbon between fingers. First, we have a meeting, she says, voice light in the way people make jokes while undressing knives. Then we burn paper. Naruto tastes iron and the faint wrong sugar of ink again. He looks up at the edict, at the neat command that expects obedience because it is written. He doesn't know how to tear it down yet. He does know he won't be going with anyone who calls theft purification. The crowd shifts, making silence out of murmurs. Someone important is coming. You can tell by how noise behaves like it owes silence money. A delegation moves through the lower walkway, robes white and crisp, rods tucked against shoulders, faces smooth, the sanctifiers, civility a weapon no less effective for its lack of edge. The leader isn't the woman from the forest. He's older, hair so neatly arranged it refracts light, eyes that look like they've never seen a street at dawn. His smile is the K. Ein strangers give children before they ask them to hand over their toys for their own good. Good people of Konoha, he says, projecting without trying. We come with mercy. Enko's laugh is a coin flicked at a beggar's cup. We are the sanctified, the man continues, as if the grammar matters more than the noun. We cleanse the world of contracts that deform it. A hellbound stands among you. Deliver him, and your people will be spared a sweeping. No one in the front row of shinobi moves. You can measure a village by the way it holds still. Naruto wants to grin because he could not love this stubborn place more than when it collectively forgets how to obey. The man's smile doesn't change. He lifts his rod in a motion that might be a benediction. A thread of white drops from the edict and touches the floor like chalk. Naruto steps forward so that when the chalk begins to draw the circle it draws it around him because he is in its way. He lets it have his shadow and not his name. He holds out his empty hands. Palms up. Tally's visible because he doesn't have time to be embarrassed. "Hi," he says, like greeting a teacher he intends to argue with and impress both. "I'm Naruto." The chain under his skin of jokes and rage and kindness and new flame pulls tight and doesn't snap. "If you came to talk, we can talk. If you came to take, you're going to hate how this goes." The Sanctifier's eyes sharpen behind the warm. "We came to save you from yourself. Get in line," Naruto says, and hears Anko's soft bark of a laugh 2 rows up. He doesn't say no, not yet. He listens to the marks humming. The way Hinata's touch left them steadied, the way Temari is already measuring wind, the way Garm is rolling on his paws as if warming up. He chooses. "Okay," he says into a silence he knows how to use. "Then go first. Save yourselves from me." He grins, not big, but bright enough to put a scratch on the edict's surface. "Stop trying to fix what you don't understand." The rod dips a fraction. The man's smile thins. "So be it," he says, and makes a small sign with his ring finger and thumb that reads like a footnote to a disaster. The edict rings once, a sound that isn't a B.L. so much as a word that forgot it was a sentence. The air cools. The village breathes in and does not breathe out. Naruto's marks flare and stabilize in the same instant. Hinata's fingers press his sleeve. Then his wrist, checking pulse like he's a patient and a fuse. Temari's fan ticks open another rib. Anko stretches her neck left, right, bored on purpose. Garm bares his teeth and smiles like a second mouth. "All right," Naruto says, loud enough for the room and the edict and the men with tidy rods and delicate threats. "Let's make this a bad sermon." Chapter 2 end. Chapter 3. Bells for the Land of Demons. By morning the edict above the arena had been taken down, not by force, not yet, but by paperwork. Konoha was very good at pretending it followed rules until the moment it didn't. A rope of polite letters and unreadable seals trailed from the Hokage's tower to the street like streamers after a parade. The ward was gone, the insult remained. People went about the day as if there wasn't. A white ring burned into their memory every time they blinked. Naruto found a bench in the corridor outside the council room and sat on his hands so they wouldn't spark. Hinata sat beside him, not touching, which made the space between them feel less like distance and more like a decision. Garm slumped at his feet with his chin on Naruto's sandal, which he judged supportive while being extremely comfortable. The council room door opened. A few clan heads drifted out with bland expressions that read like, "We have not made the problem worse with words, you are welcome." Anko flicked a look-a-roo. ND and snapped a senbon between her teeth like a toothpick. Temari backed out last with a civility that had to be deliberate. "Congratulations," she told Naruto. "You are officially everyone's favorite problem." "I have range," Naruto said. Hinata's mouth made a small smile that stayed, steady as a lantern in a breeze. "Here's the shape," Anko said, shouldering him toward the door before any official could arrive with a better plan. "The white robes have friends in places that like clean lines and a future with no surprises. A direct fight here makes a very stupid map. So, Shrine Country, Land of Demons," Temari translated. Tastefully bored. Priestess Shion. Her words cut scripture because they're older than the habit of writing everything down. If anyone can unhook Sunsteel from the world without exploding our streets, it's her. "And she wants what?" Naruto asked. "Payment," Anko said, reluctantly. "She always wants the exact cost, like a shopkeeper with an abacus." Garm yawned wide enough to show a geography of teeth. "Priestesses are good at 2 things. Dying beautifully in prophecies and making soup that tastes like water had a memory. Respect both." A messenger slid down the hall in a controlled hurry. "You're up," she told Naruto. "Mixed team, now. Border by noon." So they were a team before anyone said the word. Naruto and Hinata, Anko because knives and bad experience. Temari because Suna had as much to lose as anyone if gods started taking attendance. 2 masked Anbu with colder masks than hearts, and Garm because contracts have pet clauses. The morning ran under them like a river. At the gate, Shikamaru leaned a forearm on the guard station counter and squinted at the mission slip. "You're escorting politics," he told Naruto, disapproving on principle. "Don't bring any back." Naruto saluted with the wrong hand, which only made Shikamaru more tired. Hinata dipped a small bow and earned a ghost of respect. Anko climbed the wall and flipped off the parapet. Because someone had to calibrate how much Konoha in the air they were taking with them. The road uncoiled. The land west of Konoha goes soft first, rice paddies and sleepy groves, and then climbs, spin. Rising into old hills with knuckled roots. By midday, they were high enough to see the white thread of the river and the glitter of sunsteel where it wasn't supposed to be glittering, a faint haze above the water like frost on daylight. Sanctifiers mark rivers when they're claiming territory, Tamari said without being asked. Hearts, water, crossroads. Things that move. Good, Anko said. And they can find us when we kick them down. Naruto walked where the path narrowed, often a step ahead, often a half step back, listening with his hands. The tallies under his skin didn't itch. They twitched when he lied to himself and settled when he didn't. It was getting easier to tell the difference in time to choose. Garm trotted with the smug endurance of a creature that had never doubted he could outlast a day. I smell polished metal and sanctimony, he reported around a stick he hated and refused to drop. Also boiled millet. I hate millet. Do you like anything? Anko asked. Anchovies, Garm said. And human failure when it happens to bad people. They heard the ambush before they saw it. Hinata heard it first. The whisper of woven paper unfolding, the click of rods touching ground. She threw up a hand. Eyes already pale and wide. Below the ridge, she said. 9-3 with lattices. The sanctifiers did not shout. They unrolled the serif lattice like a polite curtain and tried to lay it over the path. The pale geometry reached for the ground with a missionary's smile. Tamari snapped her fan twice, quick and sharp. Wind met lattice at an angle that was not strength against strength but math against assumption. The lattice staggered without moving. Anchor it, Tamari said. Naruto threw a chain to the root of a hawthorn and felt it bite like an old dog. He threw another to a mossy rock. The chains webbed into a crude grid. The lattice sank onto it like a saint onto a chair with a loose leg. The leading sanctifier's eyes tightened. He shifted his formation, rods tapping in a new rhythm. The lattice shivered and attempted a different shape, a dome. Hinata's voice cut soft and precise. The joints. There, and there. Naruto felt her fingers ghost the air near his elbow. He didn't need the Byakugan to see the weak points when she shared the sight. He pivoted. The chains mimicked the movement with glee. He didn't have to shout command words, he only had to be clear about wanting. The grid flexed. Yoroi straight in one line, sloppy in the next on purpose so the dome would lean where Tamari wanted it. Tamari put wind into that lean. Not a strike, a nudge that became insistence. The dome twisted, offended, and collapsed its own joint. The sanctifiers reeled back 2 steps. Pain flickered in the leader's composure. She was the woman from the forest, jaw align, devotion dressed as discipline. Your pact will be excised, she called. Ritual words laden with threat because they believed threat was the correct seasoning for salvation. You're welcome to a turnip, Anko said. That's as close as you're getting. They didn't push the fight to blood. Professionals don't spend themselves when they're not sure of return. The white robes faded into the trees, leaving behind the ghost of their geometry and the taste of a sermon in air. Naruto stood still a moment longer than he needed to, listening. The tallies were fine. His hands weren't numb. Hinata's fingers brushed his sleeve once. A silent check. He didn't pull away. The touch felt like a weight moved from one shelf to a stronger one. They made the border by 12:30. The shrine country's road markers didn't name the land of demons, they named other things. Threshold. Pilgrim's mouth. No one dies here, officially. The last marker was a signpost twisted by weather into a question mark. An old woman sat by it selling rice cakes that had lost their crispness to the morning. Priestess? Anko asked, coin already in her fingers. The old woman gave them a look that began with mockery and found respect by the end. Shrine at Mizuhana, she said. You'll hear the bells when you're close. Or the bells will hear you. She squinted at Naruto as if trying to see a word behind his face. You're late. To what? Naruto asked. Your death, the woman said, as if naming a holiday. She took Anko's coin with 2 fingers and ate one of her own rice cakes like a dare. Soup's better up the hill. If you make it that far, eat. Tamari tipped the brim of her headscarf down far enough to hide her exact expression. Charming, she said. They climbed. The bells arrived before the shrine, small ones, irregular, stitched into the air like beads on thread. Garm stopped grumbling and pricked his ears, which meant either he respected the place or he wanted to pee on everything and was choosing restraint as a concept to try on. The shrine at Mizuhana was more house than temple. Low roofs, deep eaves, a gate with a lintel someone had sanded smooth with the patience of grief. Paper charms hung, in strings that didn't flutter unless the wind asked nicely. A pool slept at the center of a courtyard, wide and dark, edged with stones that had been touched by hands until the edges learned manners. A woman in priestess white stood at the far side of the pool, her sleeves heavy with talismans, her hair threaded with a single purple cord. Her face had the careful look of someone who had chosen not to be beautiful because it made people talk instead of listen. She was younger than Naruto expected and older in the way air can be older than stone. Shion, he thought, and his tallies hummed like a tuning fork held near another. Welcome to the place I will not let you ruin, she said, not unkindly. You may leave gifts. You may leave, period. Both are rude, Garm told Naruto. Introduce yourself like a person. Naruto stepped forward, stopping before the stone path over the pool because some places say no without speaking. Uzumaki Naruto, he said. Konoha sent us to ask for your help. You came to take it, Shion said. People like you don't ask. You carry the kind of power that makes asking feel redundant. Naruto could have made a joke. He didn't. I don't know how to do this without breaking what you keep. He said. I figured this is the part where you tell me how not to. Shion's gaze flicked over him, over Hinata beside him, over Temari's fan and Anko's grin, over Anbu, who had chosen to be shadows in the wrong place to be comforted. You are hellbound, she said to Naruto, not a question. Your marks are loud. He didn't lie. He didn't say no. The prick that would have punished the lie didn't come. Honesty settled the skin around his wrists. He opened his hands, palms up. Yes, and you want me to unwrite an edict written by metal that refuses to listen, Shion said. You want me to argue with people who made faith a blade. Because your village is worth saving and their certainty is not. She said it like naming ingredients. She had named them often. Yes, Naruto said again. Shion tipped her head as if to let something pass through her hair. In the vision I had as a child, she said conversationally, I saw a boy with chains dragging a god down by the ankles. I saw his heart go out like a candle in wind. I did not see whether the god fell. She looked at Naruto with clinical curiosity and a tenderness she kept behind her teeth. You have his hands. That's a terrible way to flirt. Anko muttered. I don't flirt, Shion said without looking at her. I assign costs. Then assign one, Naruto said. He didn't throw the words. He offered them. The cost, Shion said, is your death. Hinata went very still with a softness that made Naruto feel he would ruin something if he moved wrong. Temari's hand stayed loose on her fan. Anko's eyes pened into something wholly unlike a joke. Not an acceptable price, Naruto said, gentle. Try again. Shion's mouth pressed thin in a way that had less to do with frustration and more to do with any animal in her chest she had to put back in its cage every time she did this. It is not my price, she said. It is what the world asks, given the shape you've chosen. Then change the shape, Hinata said quietly. Like a person at the back of a classroom deciding a fact isn't finished. Her hands were still. Her Byakugan wasn't active. Her eyes were just eyes, very pale, very steady. You're the priestess. We came because your shape is better than theirs. The bells in the air rang once, very small. Shion's head turned a fraction, as if listening. Her next breath looked like someone taking their own advice and letting it hurt. Come, she said. You will not wear sandals on my floors unless I say so. You will not run in my corridors. You will not light anything on fire without warning. If you break the last rule, you will leave. Reasonable, Naruto said. Anko, Shion added, as if testing a knife on her thumb, stop smiling like that. It will chip. The corridors were dim and practical. Charms lay tucked in corners like sleeping cats. A boy in novice sleeves took their names without looking for a story in them. He moved as if every step had been taught to him by someone who hated waste. An older priest took Anko aside and asked her 3 questions in a short, formal way that turned out to be about whether she would stab anyone during a service if provoked. She promised to sit on her hands. He believed her enough to nod and hand her a string of bells to hold if it would help. They sat in a small room with a low table that held a kettle and cups so clean they might have been new air. Xian kneeled opposite them with her sleeves arranged like the writing on a careful page. "There are 3 parts to what you ask," she said. "Unwriting the metal lines, keeping the whirl, D from eating the whole where they used to be, teaching your contract to pay like a tax rather than a tithe." Enko made a pleased noise. "We're doing municipal reform. My favorite." "You are a strange woman," Xian said calmly. Enko wiggled her bells. Xian folded her hands until the sleeves met politely. "The first part one can do here with preparation and a certain amount of lying to the sky. The econ I can do if your wind worker and your eyes worker let me see what they see and give me their angles. The third," she looked at Naruto's wrists as if she could read under the skin. "The third I cannot do alone. Your Hellbound is wired to punish selfishness and encourage sacrifice until you bleed out of your choices. I can change where the pain goes. I cannot change the lesson it wants to teach." "Where can it go?" Naruto asked. "Into us," Xian said matter-of-factly. "A braided tether. When you spend, we spend. You will hate it, we will hate it. The contract will accept it if you agree and it believes you mean it." Temari's gaze slid to Hinata and back as if someone had moved a piece on a board she had been studying. Hinata didn't glance away from Xian. "How much can we carry?" she asked. "As much as we choose," Xian said. "As much as we can't bear. It is the same amount, most days." Enko stopped smiling. "Do it," she said, and Naruto couldn't tell if she meant help him or give me something to hold that hurts me instead of him for once. Maybe both. Xian's glance flicked to Naruto as if checking if he would stop her from cutting him open to save him. His hands were already open. He didn't like the taste of it. He disliked more the idea of standing alone and calling that nobility. "Teach me to pay," he said. Xian rose. "Then don't die before dinner," she said crisply, as if they were very behind schedule and the soup was not going to hold. They worked. Xian drew chalk lines that weren't chalk. Hinata showed her the way Naruto's tallies lay under his skin, not vertical, not horizontal, like columns of numbers in a book he kept with his breathing. Xian winced at the neatness. "They like lists," she said. "Lists are for people who do not trust themselves to remember why they began." Temari stood at the door and guided drafts through the room so that smoke from the incense Xian lit would move where she wanted it to, coiling into the corner where the tether would sit. Enko took the bells off and put them on again and off again and finally set them down with surprise at herself and kept her hands still. Garm set his chin on Xian's lap and pretended he wasn't helping by being warm. The Anbu receded into the edge of the room like they'd been hung there to dry. "Hold," Xian said to Naruto, and he held, a pose of breath, of not choosing for 3 heartbeats and then choosing harder. "Give me your hand." He did. Her palm was cool and dry and very strong. "Now, mark." His tallies flared in answer. For a second the old urge flooded him to duck the cost and pretend that because his reasons were good the pain had no right to collect. He didn't take the bait. He didn't lie. The sting came anyway because he hated the part of him that wanted to take the shortcut. It was smaller. It was clean. Xian didn't flinch when the first thread snapped into her palm. She took the pain like someone who had learned long ago that pain is a language that's often mispronounced and never ignored. Hinata's breath caught and then steadied. She placed her own hand on Naruto's wrist, a second tether, her touch not soft but precise. The thread split, braided, found 2 anchors where it expected one. Naruto tasted metal and ink. For one bone-bright instant he felt less alone in the exact shape he had promised to carry alone. He inhaled like a man who had been told Brea thing was optional and believed it and was now being told differently. "Again," Xian said, voice steady. "Mark." He did. Her mouth tightened. Hinata's eyes glossed with the kind of tears you don't ink away because they do not ask for attention, they only ask that you count right. Temari shifted the wind so the smoke wrote itself along the tether as if underlining a phrase. The lines became a light you could not see, only feel when you moved wrong. A bell rang outside, not soft this time. 3 strokes. 3 meant guests. The 4th meant with knives. Xian was standing before the sound finished. the sleeves of her robe sliding back without disturbing the tether. She moved like a thought finishing itself. Sanctifiers, she said. They have found the first warding circle. She looked at Naruto. Pay now or later. You will pay. How much do you want to owe before we owe it together? Naruto hated the math of it. He also loved being asked. Later, he said. We'll make more money. Anko snorted. You're adorable, she said, and scooped up her bells like a weapon. Let's go collect a tithe. The courtyard had changed. The white robes stood at the far gate with their rods angled like prayers and their faces as deliberately empty as a blade. The leader was a man this time, and his voice fell neatly where it landed. By mandate, you start all your conversations like that? Anko asked. Do you think anyone likes you? We are not here to be liked, he said, which was both true and an advertisement of poverty. Same, Tamari murmured, and then louder, you're kneeling on a woman's floor and putting your feet on her table. She held her fan closed like a ruler. Stand correctly or leave. The man inclined his head a degree, insult measured, respect measured, everything measured like tea leaves on a scale. We come to cleanse. The pact bearer is here. Deliver him. Shion stepped onto the path around the pool. Her footfalls made the tiniest sound, like the brush of paper over skin. You will not unhouse my guest, she said. You can try to break my wards and spill blood on my stones. You will not like how the bells ring after. The white robes looked at the charms in the sleeping water and saw only paper and pool. They considered sunsteel. They considered how much power they had brought. They considered victory. The leader lifted his rod. Purify, he said. The phi RST lattice opened and slid toward the pool with the smug neatness of a diagram about to be proved. The lattice didn't care about water. It cared that water does what it's told most days. It expected obedience and got Shion. She did not shout. She did not throw. She placed her palm on the belt of charms and drew a line in the air that was not chalk or fire or anything Naruto could name. The lattice hit that line and yielded the way knees yield in prayer. It bowed without meaning to. Hinata's breath flowed with it. Naruto felt the tether hum and forced himself not to yank on it like a rope. He pulled gently. The cost bit into Shion's palm. Her mouth tightened by a hair's breadth. She did not look at him as if to say do not apologize for asking me to help. He did not. Angle, Tamari said, voice crisp. Naruto's chains answered before he threw them, hungry to be useful. He tossed one into the water. It vanished and then reappeared out of a different angle like a fish deciding to be a knife. The lattice bent. Anko's senbon slid through a joint that wasn't a joint. The bells on her wrist rang once, bright and furious. The sanctifiers pushed another lattice in from the side, trying to flank the idea rather than the people. Garm tore at a robe and got a curse and a kick for his trouble. He took it with a grunt that sounded like satisfaction. Anchovies, he said. Later, Naruto moved, to stand where the lattice wanted most to pass. He could feel it. It was like standing in a river and feeling the current's mind. He raised his hands and didn't light them. He opened the verdict brand instead. Just enough to write a mark on the air in front of him, not judgment. Name. The lattice struck it and shuddered, as if being called by what it was hurt with a second-order pain. The mark didn't burn it. It reminded it. Hinata's palm found Naruto's back for a heartbeat and left. He didn't stumble. He placed another brand, lower, like stepping stones for an idea that was pretending to be a wall. The lattice had to decide whether to be a wall or a walker. It hated the choice. It slowed. Now, Tamari said. Wind cut in a precise stroke. Charms answered like a choir. The lattice came apart without a bang. Insulted out of existence. The white robes didn't retreat this time. They frowned. New calculation running through lines of faces that were not allowed to admit confusion. The lead. R lifted his rod and began to speak a different prayer, the words stacking into a shape Naruto could feel like a pressure in his teeth. Shion's hand snapped up. Not in my yard, she said, and the bells in the eaves screamed like birds. The pool's surface rose without breaking and held, water making a lens that bent light where the prayer wanted it straight. The white robes faltered, just long anew. GH for Anko to cross the garden in 3 steps that didn't exist between where she was and where she ended up. Her knife kissed the leader's rod and left a nick. The nick became a wound in the sentence the rod was trying to write. Leave, Shion said. Or bleed. The man looked at Naruto then, not at Shion, not at the fan or the knife. He tried a smile that wanted to be pity. You cannot keep him from the mandate, he said. You can only delay mercy. Mercy does not put itself on timetables, Hinata said, and Naruto loved her then with the uncomplicated love of a person watching someone else say the thing they were born to say. The man weighed risk again and dignified, not liking his odds with a retreat that looked like a choice he would have preferred to make anyway. The white robes backed out the gate. The bells relaxed fractionally. The pool's surface settled. The incense smoke wrote continue in the corner. Shion didn't sit. She moved straight to her workroom and kept working. The tether was only half built, and the circles outside the shrine wouldn't hold if she wasn't there to scold the sky. They did not sleep that night. Naruto dozed with his head against a wall that smelled like cedar and thyme. Twice he woke to the sound of Shion's breath catching and saw her press her palms against the tether so gently he wanted to look away to give privacy to effort. Once Hinata tucked a blanket under Garm's chin and pretended she hadn't. Temari took an hour to walk the perimeter and came back with dust on her knees and a new angle in her eyes. Anko sat on a roof beam and talked to the dark in short, obscene sentences that sounded like prayers if you didn't understand the language. At dawn, when the bells were at their thinnest, like hair in mist, the sanctifiers came with torches and a choir. They didn't burn anything, the torches were for light to make sure everyone saw. The choir sang scripture that was almost pretty. Overnight, someone had erected a sunsteel frame over the road, a minimal arch with the geometry of a trap that liked to call itself a gate. Beneath it a circle waited, inked into the dirt with iron filings and rainwater so it would bite harder when it was fed. They're going to do a sweep, Anko said, tone flat. Like salting a field. They can't, the novice boy said, speaking out of turn because fear filed off his manners. This is a neutral road. Neutral roads are snacks, Temari said. They require teeth. Shion tied a new cord around her wrist. We have teeth, she said. And we have a stubborn child who refuses to be dinner. Naruto's grin flashed. It didn't reach his eyes. I like soup better, he said. They went to the road like neighbors going to a meeting. The bells followed them, not tied to cords now but tied to permission. Sanctifiers arrayed themselves in two parallel lines so neat Naruto could smell the training. Good morning, the leader said. Deliver the Hellbound. Deliver yourself to common sense, Anko replied pleasantly. We have no quarrel with you, he said to Shion, which was such a spectacular line Naruto's skin prickled just hearing it. We have a contract with our guests, Shion said. You can put your quarrels in a bag and beat them with a stick. Poetry, Garm sighed happily. They did not wait to be granted anything. The sanctifiers moved in a series of gestures too simple to be dances and too ritualized to be mere fighting. The sunsteel arch hummed. The circle in the road lifted its iron filings like insects taking flight. The air did the thing air does around a vacuum. Naruto stepped into it. He could have stood behind Shion and let her take the brunt and then paid later when no one was watching. He did not like that plan. He lit his hands. The flame did not roar. It drew in, tight and black and tidy. As if learning manners like he had promised in the street. The first wave of script hit him like rain. The flame didn't burn it. It read it and set it aside. The second wave was sharper. Letters that wanted to carve the category of him out of the day. His tallies flared. Pain lanced under his skin. Shion's tether caught and braided it with her own. Hinata's hand touched his ba. CK and every bit of him that wanted to turn this into a performance dove for cover. The arch tried to lower. Temari stood where its shadow wanted to be and moved the wind in a way that made the shadow late. The arch sulked and met the ground wrong. The circle spat iron in irritation. Anko flicked Sanbon into joints that pretended not to exist and they existed embarrassingly. The leader changed tactics. He spoke a smaller prayer. One meant to go into a particular ear. Naruto felt the itch of a verdict that wasn't his own brand, an attempt to write his name over with their idea of what it meant. He bared his teeth. No, he said, not loud, not polite, but very correct. The flame obliged by hissing like a librarian shushing a child. The alien brand on the air faltered, lost its confidence, and smudged. Hinata's fingers pressed a point near his sternum, just a touch, the lightest closing of a pathway. His marks settled into the tether like a river finds its bed. For a heartbeat, Naruto saw it, the shape Shion had been trying to build. A second accounting book laid over his own, the columns aligned, the sums shared. He saw the way pain moved when two people carried it, how it didn't have so much as change. He hated it and he loved it and he wanted to be worthy of it in a way that made him angry at himself. Again, Shion said, not for the sanctifiers. For Naruto. Again, he said, N.D. opened just enough to accept the cost without using it as a weapon against himself. It hurt. It hurt correctly. The arch cracked. Not with lightning, not with glory. With the honest complaint of A.T. Hing not made to stand up to being asked why. The choir wavered. The iron filing settled. The leader raised his rod to throw contempt as a spear and found Anko in front of him where she hadn't been. Her knife hard against the underside of his chin, her body a lesson in the use of personal space. You're in the wrong house, she told him softly. Leave before I start enjoying this. He looked into her eyes and saw a cost he couldn't name. He flinched. He stepped back. He made a sign and it meant retreat with a flavor of we'll come back with more friends. They left. Again. Not as neatly. Choir quiet. Torches lowered. Rods angry like people who thought they were above anger. The bells calmed around the edges, not in the middle. Shion kept standing until the last white robe was a memory. Then, she exhaled and folded with the grace of someone choosing the floor before the floor chose her. Hinata was there without planning, catching her under the elbow with a touch that had no noise in it. Naruto knelt, not to be dramatic, but because standing felt like pretending he didn't owe the room. Soup, Garm announced. Now, Shion laughed once, the sound of a page cracking along an old fold. Yes, she said, soup. They ate on the veranda with their legs tucked under and bowls warm against their palms. The soup tasted like the water had remembered the bones of chicken and decided to be generous. It was good. Naruto didn't realize how good until he was halfway through the bowl and his shoulders unlocked. Shion set her bowl down and looked at him the way people look at roads they know are about to take them somewhere unpleasant. My vision changed, she said. Hinata's breath paused, then continued as if she had told her body to be calm. Temari did not set down her bowl. Anko tilted hers to see the bottom. Because she hated wasting anything, even dread. When I was young, Shion said, I saw a boy with chains dragging a god down by the ankles. Her voice didn't pretend this was new. He died on a hill with bells in the grass. Naruto listened. The tallies under his skin were quiet enough for other people's truths. This morning, Shion said, eyes on the edge of the roof. It changed. The hill is not a hill. It is the sky, not metaphorically. She made her mouth smile. It didn't fool anyone. You die up there. That's very dramatic, Garm said. I approve. Don't, Hinata said. Garm laid his head on her knee and pretended it wasn't affection. Naruto felt the taste of iron and burnt sugar and choice. He could joke. He could say I wasn't planning to make it to 70 anyway. He could say prophecies or suggestions. All of those were true and all of them would be lies the tallies would punish if he tried to live inside them. He swallowed. He felt the tether on his wrist. Light as a promise someone intends to keep even if it hurts. Okay, he said. Hinata's head turned sharply. Okay, I hear you, he said. Okay, I won't pretend I didn't. Okay, we will WR. Something over it that makes it work and not just end. He rubbed his thumb over the faint scar at the base of his palm where the brush had burned him. Okay, I don't like it. Shion's shoulders aced as if he had answered the test she was too kind to make out loud. We do not have to accept the price to prepare for paying it, she said. Or to change the menu, Temari said. Sky is a terrible place to die unless you like drama. Pick better ground. Or bring a ladder, Anko suggested. Anchovies, Garm reminded everyone. For me, for morale. Hinata's hand found Naruto's again, not auditioning for a future, not making a scene. Her fingers were small and very strong. We're going to build a better tether, she said. This one carries pain, the next one can carry something else. Debt, Shion said, curious. Joy, she tilted her head. Obligation. Choice, Naruto said, because if he didn't say it he might not be able to stand the idea of not saying it. I want a tether that carries choice. Shien's eyes warmed without softening. That's illegal, she said, which sounded like hope. Let's make it a crime, Tamari said. And then enforce it. They worked again through the afternoon. Not because the sanctifiers would be back that day. They were disciplined enough to spend hours punishing themselves before admitting the tactical problem, but because this was how you took tomorrow by the throat politely. The tether grew thicker. Naruto learned to push the cost through it without throwing weight like a child lifting too much. Hinata learned where to touch to make the marks settle faster. Shien learned not to flinch at the shape of Naruto's flame when it wasn't behaving like fire. At dusk, villagers from the hills came with quiet steps and jars of pickles, offering set due. WN under the eaves like yeses to a question nobody wanted to ask. Shien took the jars and the yeses with the same seriousness. She saw to it that the pickles were put in a place they would be eaten and not become a shrine to fear. After sunset, when the bells turned silver and the pool mirrored the sky in a way that made the real sky feel like a copy, a messenger from the road came with dust on high. Ankles and a face arranged into not quite panic. They're building something, he said to Shien and to the cords and to the idea of safety that had come to live on this veranda. Far off, high up, a platform, a tower. Temari's fan lifted a fraction. Anko's knife twitched toward her sleeve. Hinata's breath steadied deliberately. Naruto felt his tallies hum in a way that was not warning exactly, not yet, it was recognition. They like to write from high places, Shien said. They think it makes the rules taller. Garm put a paw on Naruto's foot. You wanted the sky, he said. You got it, Nar. Yuto leaned his head back against the post and looked up. The stars were ordinary. They were magnificent and utterly uninterested in the day's politics. We'll go to them, he said. Before they finish. Before it becomes a place the world thinks is normal. Tamari nodded once, all plan. Kumo border ridge, she said, reading wind like a map. Storm country sky, tall enough to be stupid. Then we will bring rope, Anko said. Cheerful again now that the road had a cliff. Shien reached out and touched the tether between Naruto's wrist and hers, between Naruto's wrist and Hinata's. You will take this with you, she said. It will hold as long as I stand. When it breaks, you will know I have fallen or somebody wiser has told me to sit. Don't fall, Naruto said. Don't die in my courtyard, Shien returned. The automatic form of affection she had learned to live in. It stains. Hinata's shoulder bumped Naruto's, a whisper of contact so small it could have been an accident if they were worse liars. We'll make them come down, she said, voice low and fierce. We'll make them have to look us in the eye. Naruto didn't look at her. He didn't have to. The space between them felt like a decision they had made in a hallway and were still making. He thought of the first time she touched his chest in the arena, of the way her hand had anchored the marks in his skin without asking permission from a crowd. He thought, I will not let the sky take that. All right, he told the night, and the shrine, and the bells, and the road that would insist on hills and bad weather. Let's choose something rude. They left before midnight because timing was a weapon too. The road up country buckled under old storms. The sanctifiers had set watch posts made of light and rods on 3 ridges. They left 2 empty and stuffed the 3rd with certainty. Tamari read it and picked the certainty. People who think they are tricking you by being predictable are fun in a way that doesn't get old. They were seen, of course. That was part of the plan. An alarm did not clang. It tightened, the way a house tightens when someone touches the locked front door. Naruto felt the tether. Shien felt the tug. Some air behind them. A bell rang once and then was very quiet, ready. The tower was not a tower. It was a scaffold built of sunsteel beams with writing sandwiched between plates like intent in a sandwich. Climbing the side of a thunderhead anchored to nothing visible. Ropes made of script ran between it and the ground. Men walked the beams with the calm of carpenters who had been told this was a cathedral. They were building a pulpit high enough for a god to speak from and hear himself echo off the clouds. Subtle, Anko said. Ugly, Tamari said. Snack, Garm asked, incredibly hopeful. Hinata's H. And found Naruto's sleeve and tugged once, a quiet remember the tether. He nodded, and the nod ran down the thin cord like a sound. The plan was not complicated. Wind to pull, chains to hold, bells to scold, eyes to guide. They did not throw themselves at the base and beg to be ground under. They walked up the ropes like thieves who own the house. Halfway up, the sanctifiers noticed the wrong move. Meant. Not the bodies on the ropes. That was expected, but the refusal that moved with them. The leader from the road flung his voice up to meet them. By mandate. No, Naruto said, and his flame drew in tight until it was a black thread along his knuckles. He put it into a rope and cut a sentence in half. Hinata pointed. There. Temari pushed off the rope and landed lightly on a crossbeam where the writing was thickest. She didn't strike. She stole wind from around a knot and moved it somewhere else. The beam complained and then gave a hairline of metal noise that made every white robe on it feel their own weight. Anko hit the next beam and didn't stab anyone. She hammered a wedge of Senbon into a joint that pretended it was not a joint and then kicked it rudely. You built this like a person who has never fallen. She informed the architecture. Today you learn. The scaffold teetered as if deciding what to be loyal to. The ropes sang. The script tightened, lines pulling fractal crooked in panic. Brace. Shien's voice said through the tether, so faint Naruto knew she was paying for the words with something she would not advertise. Do not be in the air when it decides. Copy, Naruto said, and threw chains into the cloud itself, into water that wasn't willing to be touched, and felt them catch not on substance but on permission. He had never done that before. It felt like asking every raindrop to hold a brushstroke out of kindness and them agreeing out of curiosity. He loved them for that. They climbed fast. The top platform loomed, a writing table the size of a parade ground. Ink trays full of powdered sunsteel, brushes like poles, rods like scaffolding. Men stood at posts humming a prayer that told the sky it was a floor. The leader on the platform turned. Dian looked down at Naruto and saw the boy with chains and smiled like a man who had finally got his line to rhyme. Deliver yourself, he called, and there was real joy in it. Spare the villages. Naruto stood on the last beam and grinned up at him. Get in line, he said, because some jokes were true forever, and then he ran. He didn't run in a straight line because straight lines on scaffolds are only for people who plan to fall. He moved like wind remembers, shoulder ducked, steps light, chains flinging ahead of him to make handrails out of bad decisions. Hinata was at his shoulder and not always a half step where he wasn't to catch the bit of the last foot that would slide. Temari flowed in angles and Anko in rude curves that made men swear and then fall because the curve moved when they braced for the straight. They hit the platform as lightning stitched the edge of the cloud to itself. Sunsteel glowed with holy irritation. Naruto's tallies flared and settled. Shien's tether hummed like an instrument warming. The leader lifted his rod high and spoke the first words of a mandate that wasn't like any they'd heard. This one was the marriage of scripture and height and arrogance. So pure it stopped being a sin and became a science. The air moved to obey. Naruto tasted it. The shape of a law that says no pact shall touch this world. It would shake the biju like coins in a can. It would turn contracts into ash. Now, Shien breathed through the tether, small and fierce. Right on top of it, Naruto raised his hands. He didn't pour flame. He opened the verdict brand and draw. GGED it through the air and left a stroke that wasn't judgment. It was a name for what a thing becomes when it is given and not taken. The mandate hit it and slipped like a knife through light. Hinata's palm found his back. There and gone, so that when the tallies tried to bite into him for daring to say no to the wrong no, they found two throats to chew on. Temari slammed wind into the edges of the mandate, not to stop it, but to fold it, to make it trip over itself. Anko jammed Senbon into trays so that powdered sunsteel sleeted out of bounds. Garm bit a robed ankle and ruined a man's day, so see. Completely he would become a cautionary tale about disrespecting dogs for years to come. It was too much and just enough. The mandate wavered. The platform tilted. The leader stared at Naruto and saw a boy who should have been an instrument and was being a person. He snarled. Not a prayer now, just a man with a project sliding toward the cliff of failure, and flung his rod at Naruto like a spear. Naruto could have burned it. He didn't. He caught it with a chain and flung it back, not as a weapon but as an offer. Take your words and use them somewhere they belong. The leader snatched it through Flex and looked stupid for a second because kindness had confused him. The platform went wrong all at once. Not in a cinematic tumble, just a slide, a betray. Shien's voice said jump through the tether and they jumped. Naruto grabbed Hinata's wrist. Hinata grabbed Anko's sleeve. Anko caught a rope with her teeth because she wasn't precious about dignity. Tamari leapt clean and landed on a second beam that refused to let her fall because she had told Wind what it would do and it had agreed. They fell a distance that made conversation complicated, then didn't fall because chains hit Cloud and Cloud decided to be stairs for brats. They scrambled and swung and landed badly and then less badly and then running again because the scaffold wasn't waiting for their gratitude. The top platform tore away and spun like a tossed coin. For a second the mandate wrote itself on nothing and became an idea without a paper to stick to. Naruto had a breath to choose arrogance or mischievousness. He chose mischief. He stuck his tongue out at the sky. The sky wrote later. They hit the ground in a cascade of curses and gratitude and one barked laugh from Anko that was all relief. The scaffold folded in on itself gently, as if embarrassed to have been implicated. The white robes retreated not as a line but as individuals who had discovered that belief needs better rails. Lightning licked the hill polite as a cat. The bells in the shrine of Valley Away rang once, sharp and faint. The tether quivered, taut and singing. Shien's knees hit her floor 3 breaths later, in a room Naruto couldn't see, in a doorway he would find 3 days from now by accident. She caught herself and sat. She let the tether go slack and then taut again and then slack and breathed like a human. She spoke into the cord, with the last bit of voice she had not spent. Don't die in my house, she said. It stains. Naruto lay on his back in grass that would be muddy by morning. Hinata lay beside him, not quite touching. Tamari stood over them, fan like an umbrella that shaded confidence rather than sun. Anko flopped down at their feet and glared at the stars as if daring them to brag. Garm sprawled smugly on Naruto's chest and pretended to be heavier than he was. Soup, Garm said into Naruto's collarbone, muffled. Anchovies, Naruto said into the night. Tomorrow, Tamari said. Later, the sky whispered again. And Naruto wondered if it was a promise or a threat and decided it didn't know either. He closed his eyes for a beat that wasn't sleep. He felt the tallies under his skin like a choir that had learned a second part. He felt Hinata's breath, close enough to count. He felt the rope he'd thrown into the cloud laugh quietly because it had worked. He felt the shape of something waiting, a god with a pen, maybe. A task force with holier metal, a rule that would have to be taught to bend without breaking. Okay, he said softly, because he wanted the day to know he had heard it. We'll make a better tether. Then we'll go upstairs and argue. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. Storm above the cloud. The mountains on Kumo's border are old in the knees and young in the mood. Wind runs knife-sharp off the ridges. And thunder wears the same feral grin every afternoon as if it's just remembered a good joke. Naruto's breath ghosts in front of him, snatched thin. The tether on his wrist hums like a tight string, somewhere far behind. Shien's pulse answers, steady, unwilling to be dramatic unless the world insists. Left fork, Tamari says, as if reading a note only wind can deliver. She taps her fan again, saint her shoulder and squints at the bruised smudge where storm meets plateau. They built under that, if they're smart. Which they are not, but they are supervised by people who are. Anko, Hinata says softly, glancing to where the Jonin walks an edge like it pays her taxes. 2 ahead, high metal content. Her Byakugan shines, then fades, control like a hand on a dimmer switch. Masks, not ours. Sanctifier scouts, Anko says, yawning in a way that shows careful teeth. Their shoes squeak holy. Focus, Garm says from Naruto's ankles, tail held with offended dignity against the cold. If I freeze I will sue the weather. Anchor a complaint to the Thunderhead, Naruto tells him, breathing into his gloves. I'll co-sign. The pass narrows to a throat of black rock and spills them onto a shelf that looks like a giant's palm cupped against the wind. Below, the plateau stretches, flat as a lie, broken by low outcroppings and lightning-scarred stumps. If you don't know what you're looking at, it's just weather. If you do, it's a foundry pretending not to be. Vents shaved into stone, barely visible, a hum under the ground like breath held too long. Sunsteel crucibles, Tamari says. Quote, they keep them underground to avoid accidental condemnation by thunder. Thunder condemns everything eventually, Anko says. It's democratic. A trio of shadows unlaces themselves from a ridge across the shelf and lands with the neat efficiency of shinobi who know their scene. Their flak vests are Kumo cut, clean lines, solid plates. Their posture is please say something stupid and we'll teach you not to. The lead woman has cat bright eyes, hair cut short, a blue flame stamped into the look that lives around her. Yugito ni, Anko murmurs to Naruto, like telling him the name of a knife. Welcome to someplace you shouldn't be, Yugito says aloud, scoping them, one heartbeat on each. Suna fan, Kona Hajanen, pale-eyed Hyuga, boy with the wrong fire and a dog that smells like stubbornness. State your mission or start running. Sanctifiers built a sunsteel foundry under your storm, Tamari says smoothly, the diplomat because she is sick of watching diplomats be worse at it. They're fab, ricating lattices and scripture anchors by the hundred. That's bad for us, it's worse for you, seeing as they like to write laws about Biju. Yugito's eyes flicker, only once. Proof. Anko tosses a little square of metal across the space. Sunsteel, shaved thin, edges neat, handheld. Yugito doesn't catch it so much as let it choose her palm. She doesn't flinch at the chill. She holds it up so her Eam can see the etched script that doesn't bend light so much as instruct it. Where'd you get that? She asks, voice even. Borrowed it from a man who thought he could talk through a service, Anko says. He's asleep. Yugito's mouth almost smiles, then remembers itself. Konoha has a way of making its problems contagious. We're trying to vaccinate, Naruto says before his filter realizes there is a time. He lifts his hands, palms open, tallies visible in a brief fleck of light through cloud. We're asking to help shut it down. You can claim the win. We'd like the world not to be rewritten while we argue about credit. Yugito reads his hands like scripture and scar together. Her chin ticks. She doesn't ask about the marks. She asks what matters. Collateral. Minimal, Naruto says. He doesn't let his mouth oversell. We have a lattice that spreads the cost. We'll carry it. We're not feeding anyone to hell to make it cleaner. Her pupils contract, feline. You think I'd allow that? I think you've been asked to before. He says, and the pinprick sting at his wrist is mercifully absent because this is a guess and it's not kind. The wind shifts, bitter. Yugito's jaw clenches once. Then she looks past him to Hinata. You keep his pulse steady, she says. You're the one who tells his body to behave. Hinata's cheeks pink in the cold, not embarrassment, just blood moving. I read what the marks want. I argue. He listens. Sometimes. Naruto huffs. Yugito actually smiles this time, quick and real. Matabi burns blue, she says. She burns clean. She hates scripture dressed as chains. We don't like your Hellbound either. But I like less the idea of boys being taken by people who call theft purification. Then we do a thing together, Tamari says, crisp. You hold the mountain. We open the pot. We let lightning judge a recipe. Yugito nods once, and that's a treaty. You follow my lead on the approach. One false step and the foundry will hear us coming and right the ground wrong. The route she chooses is stubborn, hugging the windshadow of rock spines, slipping across black moss that eats sound, pausing when lightning touches a far ridge so they can move while thunder swallows their footfalls. She doesn't show off. She teaches without saying the word. Naruto watches her feet and learns the grammar of Kumo's moving. At the last rise, she lifts a hand and they all fold behind a basalt fin. Below them, a roof of iron grating stitches the plateau into squares. Heat fogs the seams. Through the grid, figures move. Sanctifier smiths without robes work clothes hide religion well. Masked technicians feeding lines of script into rolling plates, a central crucible the size of a sake brewery glowing with honest heat. Anchors at the four corners, Hinata murmurs, eyes wide, not soft. They pull prayer through the metal. And she taps a knuckle against the rock, a vent shaft that isn't. It leads to a ladder, to a control gallery. One scribe. Anko's eyes harden at the word. Naruto feels her attention change like a weather front. She breathes out. Once, exhale of the self that lunged, inhale of the one that counts. Mine, she says, not claiming, Zhu. Stating where she might be useful without breaking the mission. Yugito draws a tight diagram in the grit, not because she expects anyone to forget but because putting plans on ground makes them willing to happen. I drop first. Blue fire to the south vent to force their ears east. Wind girl. Tamari. Tamari says. Tamari. Give me a slice across the crucible vent 3 counts after that. Hyuga. Keep Hellboy from throwing his life at the thing. Hellboy. Naruto. Hinata says. Naruto. Yugito continues. Deadpan, you throw your chains after my fire and hold the crucible mouth at half open. Sunsteel hates being indecisive. It will falter. Shien. Naruto says, not looking at his wrist like a child with a secret, just breathing so the tether feels it. The hum answers under the skin. Here, the shrine country bell he carries in his bones rings small, fierce. Ready. The tether tightens in answer. Do not die in a smelter, Shien says through the bone flute line. It stains. Copy. Naruto murmurs. They move. Yugito drops like a blue star. Matabi's flame is not Naruto's black. It doesn't drink heat. It makes it clean, so clean even sound scalds. Men look up as if the air has turned to sweet smoke. Enko ghosts the ladder before anyone registers ladders exist. Temari's fan snaps open, and the third rib hums to a pitch that is precise disobedience. Wind shears into the crucible's exhale. Sparks lift like a school of fish turning. Naruto lands hard and doesn't bounce. His flame draws tight around his hands, a black thread. He throws chains through grating so they bite the crucible lip. The foundry's deep hum shifts into something like complaint, metal not sure whether to be liquid or law. He anchors the chains to the spine of a cooling rack and hauls. Obsidian heat in his knuckles, sweat at his hairline. Tally's twitching. 3 degrees, Hinata says behind him, palm a whisper between his shoulder blades. Too wide, you'll surge. I like surges, he grits. You like living more, she says, and he does. So he holds the mouth exactly where she told him, in that weird zone where 2 bad decisions cancel for a second. Yugito wades into the vent like it owes her money. Blue fire falls into the crucible. Sunsteel hisses. Script peels like dead paint. Workers shout. Someone starts a prayer. Someone else coughs the prayer out because air is wrong. Yugito laughs once. Short, exhilaration kept under discipline. The first real sanctifier hits the gallery with a spear of sunsteel braided around scripture, a weapon designed to tell a story at speed. His eyes are polished stone, the mouth is an austerity. Aegis, another of their specialists, the sort who passes for saintly until you see the joints in the armor. He throws the spear with the confidence of a man who has been taught that gravity loves him. Naruto's chains throw it off honesty just enough. The spear takes the wrong god, misses a prayer, buries in a wall of regulation with a clean thunk. Aegis doesn't grimace. He is not here to be disappointed. Deliver the Hellbound, he says, moving in a way that declares he is the delivery mechanism. Try catching him first, Tamari says, and carves wind under his foot so he steps where ground isn't. He recovers with unpleasant grace and lifts a hand, 2 fingers touching the air as if washing it. A sunsteel clip snaps, and the grating under Naruto's boots perfa. RMS a little slight. Words briefly become floor, then trap, then floor again. It's not a jutsu, it's a mandate light, local ordinance enforced with metal. Hinata's palm hits Naruto's chest. Breath, she says. He does. The brand wants to answer Aegis's little trick with a big trick. The tallies twitch like ticks on a thread. He doesn't give them the gift of an audience. He angles a chain. It bites. Aegis's spear when he yanks it free and holds it for an insultingly long heartbeat. Aegis looks at Naruto properly for the first time and makes the face of a man who has found lacquer on a tool he meant to use like a club. You are young, he notes, neutrally. You are boring, Naruto says, less neutral. Yugito materializes at his shoulder in a sliver of heat, Matabi's blue licking at her wrists like bracelets. Their spear reads your chains, she says, economical. Make them right each other. Naruto grins, reckless and useful. After you. They split the next exchange with no conversation. Yugito throws blue fire against the spear's shaft, not to melt but to clean, scraping off the slick of prayer. Naruto threads 2 chains in opposite spirals around it. The spear catches, held in a compromise it was not built to entertain. For a second the weapon is 3 arguments about what it is. Temari's wind slaps the indecision. The spear breaks where prayer insisted. Aegis leaves it with O. T looking hurt and draws a second. Not a twin, a cousin. Shorter, no date bruiser's tool, words carved into the metal like a spiteful ledger. The fight climbs, gallery to catwalk to roofline. Rain starts, as if the clouds have decided process must be observed before seen. Aegis moves with scripture's economy, his spear writing no into Naruto's flame at every turn. Naruto writes Y in response and Arns how Y isn't a block so much as a stutter, enough to make no consider itself, which is all a question needs to work. Captives, Hinata says, eyes lifted, voice small and absolute in his ear. North Quadrant, shackled to their stations. Naruto glances. A row of men with sunburned forearms and careful eyes clap plates into machines that give them nothing back but heat and a dull pride in not dying at work today. Chains, real ones, iron, not metaphor, bind their ankles. Aegis tracks Naruto's attention and doesn't look. He doesn't need to. He knows the math. He has lived on a hill where math was a prayer. Release them and the crucible will surge, Aegis says mildly, not threat, information. You will drown in the thing you came to stop. Then we use a bucket, Naruto says, and turns his back on Aegis in the way you only do if you believe in your friends or in death, kin. Temari's wind curves between him and spear. Yugito's blue lays a line that says don't in a language even Sunsteel respects. Enko's silhouette flits in the corner of his sight, gone. Naruto drops to the grating. The captives flinch and then look as if not looking would be worse. He keeps his voice ordinary, because fear listens better when you don't shout. I'm going to open a door near your ankle, he says to the nearest man. It'll feel like cold. If you hate it, kick me. We've hated worse, the man says around a laugh that thinks it's dying. Do it. Naruto presses a fingertip to the chain and opens a gate the size of a coin. Cold slips through, honest as a grave. The iron shivers and then is not here, moved, not broken, not thrown away. His marks bite, not hard, not as punishment, reminder. Hinata's palm steadies that bite like sweet tea after bad medicine. The man gasps, and then his ankle is his again. Go, Naruto says. The man looks at his coworkers, not Naruto, because this isn't a story about Naruto for him. He jerks his chin. Go, he tells them, and that go spreads faster than any jutsu. They move. A flood of decision through the lanes. The crucible hum changes pitch as hands leave it unattended, the way a furnace notices when love is not being wasted on it. Aegis points his spear as if disapproval were a function. A thin wave of words sweeps the platform. Sunsteel clips on the captives, chains flare like fish biting. Naruto lunges, and Hinata is already there, palm snapping again. Saint 3 clips so that their chakra pathways stutter long enough to be stupid. Again, she says, and he opens 3 gates at once, 3 cold coin mouths taking iron and refusal elsewhere. Pain bites like a dog, his marks surge. Bright white hot, wanting to punish him for choosing a costlier good over a cheaper win. Shien's tether takes half. It's not half, it's different. He hates it. He breathes and lets it happen. Don't take the ledger personally, Shien says, voice a ghost of breath down the line. It was made by people who tally because they're afraid to forget. Noted, he says, then louder to a worker who pauses. Mouth open. Run. They run. Aegis watches the row melt and recalibrates. He turns his spear toward the crucible, toward the mouth Naruto holds at half open. He's going to make it decide. Worse. He's going to make Naruto decide wrong. Tamari, Naruto says, too late and just in time. On it, she replies, which is simultaneously a comfort and a threat to the weather. She leaves the catwalk and stride falls into the open. Her fan opens all the way and the wind under the storm, heavy, slick with approaching lightning, takes a breath like she owns its throat. Now, she says, and the storm obeys. Because Tamari is good at giving orders to natural disasters. Lightning crawls into the sky above them like a thought choosing words. The crucible mouth flares an ugly white. Naruto's chains complain in his hands, trying to be 6 where he needs 8. He throws another, and another, into wind this time, anchoring not to objects but to currents because his teacher right now is the girl with the fan. He feels them catch. He laughs, wild and happy, because impossible is polite until you ask twice. Enko, he calls, because she hasn't made a mess yet and that is suspicious. Busy. Enko sings from somewhere with corridors. Don't blow up the building I'm in. He believes her when she's good, he worries when she is kind. He holds the mouth at exactly half, Hinata's palm holds his spine. Shien's tether holds the part of his heart that wants to sprint ahead and pay all at once just to feel something resolve. Lightning drops like a verdict. It isn't one bolt, it's three. Braided midair by wind that learned manners from Temari and bad manners from Naruto. They hit the crucible's lip, not center, Temari's angle, not dramatic but effective. Sunsteel screams the way metal does when you teach it regret. The crucible skews on its moorings, dumping heat and partially baked scripture into channels that yawn to be fed and choke instead. The foundry's hum becomes a cough. Again, Temari says. Again, Naruto says, and they yank and slice and brace. Aegis lunges in the middle of the cough, because that is when professionals hit. His spear kisses Naruto's shoulder. It should be worse. Yugito's blue flame eats the prayer on the blade and leaves only the push. Naruto spins and catches the haft with a chain. The spear bucks. Aegis lets go and draws a sunsteel rod the length of a shinbone. Inscribed compact. He swings it like a hammer. Honest, no elegance, just intent. And this. Listen to me, a voice says, and the world tilts. He's not on the platform. He's standing in water up to his ankles. The gate inside him is open like it always is, because he has never learned to lock doors without hating himself. Bars rear in front of him, tall as remembering. Behind them, an eye blinks the color of sunset swallowed and decided it was something else. Kurama, it took you long enough, the fox says, not disdainful exactly. Just correct. Naruto's breath goes short because the first thing you feel in here is your own anger misnamed as his. He doesn't apologize for it. Busy, he says, and the word is stupid and therefore honest. Kurama's gaze slides to the black thread of flame that follows Naruto's fingers like a pet too close to biting. Hell is gaudy, he says. I am not impressed. Join the club, Naruto says. The fight outside shouts. He tries not to shift. You need to stop making yourself into a wall, Kurama says, and the chain link in that voice isn't his, it's the world's, heavy with always and never. Walls break. Be current. Flow and carry and cut stone when you want. But do not let children tell you where you begin. Naruto laughs because he is terrified and because Kurama has just given him permission to be what he's been pretending isn't selfishness. Help me, he says. Not for your sake, for mine. Kurama bares teeth the size of the kind of mistake you marry. Finally, he says. He leans forward until breath pushes through the bars. I hate your contract's grammar. But I like the way you tell it no. Take a mouthful. Naruto breathes in, and fire that isn't hell moves under the hell, a warmth that loves weight because it knows how to carry it. His marks burn, then ease. In the space of one breath, they become ledger and tide, not a trap. He opens his eyes. The platform is still trying to fall. Aegis's rod waits to break something important. Naruto's chains don't throw, they pull like currents. He steps into the swing instead of away from it, moves the rod past him with the gentleness of a teacher turning a page. And slams his palm, verdict brand open, not to judge, onto Aegis's intent. The mark writes wrong target in a language the man's body was taught by pain. His arm stutters. The blow misses. His eyes widen because he's old enough at this stuff to recognize when someone has made his favorite sin go limp. Yugito steps in, because she's the kind of ally who doesn't wait for sentiment. Blue fire orbits her hands. She hammers the butt of her palm into Aegis's shoulder with precision flamboyant only if you like results. His rod clatters. He doesn't pick it up. Professionals know when they've lost a tool. There, Anko says from the catwalk above, voice lighter than a woman with old ghosts ought to be. She throws a sack down. It lands by Naruto's foot and splits, spilling rolls of paper cove. Red in Orochimaru's greasy meticulousness. Curse seal primers. A note under the paper burns faintly. Anko's handwriting is prettier than she wants to admit. He loved them. I broke them. Choice as a knife. I chose. Naruto's throat spasms. He looks up to find her on the rail, knife held loosely, eyes bright and ugly and free. She had a man tied to the lattice. Once, in a dead life, she did not cut his throat. She cut the past. Crucible. Temari says, voice iron. Now, The storm has been waiting respectfully while humans figure themselves out. Naruto throws every chain he has left into the crucible lip and holds. Yugito throws blue. Temari brings the sky down precisely. Hinata's palm leaves his back and strikes the air twice to clear chakra clots he didn't know he had. Shien's tether hums like a bell before a wedding. Lightning kisses the crucible at the seam. The seam gives like grace. The foundry stops being a place and becomes a lesson. Script cooks, curls, breaks. Sunsteel floods in. Two channels not built for humility and cools wrong, brittle as certainty that just met weather. Aegis pulls back with the last of his team, chest heaving, spear abandoned, rod gone. He starts to open. A decree, 2 fingers and thumb making a neat square of command, and has to close it because the square collapses like a tent cut at one pole. Run, he says to his own, and obeys his order, because he is that brand of good. Naruto sags. The tallies under his skin are a chorus of enough. Hinata catches his shoulder and makes his body believe her. The captives spill into the rain, faces tilted to the clean water like people who have been indoors forever. Yugito's flame gutters, then flares, then staples to a discipline he hasn't seen often, the way she refuses to be more dramatic than necessary. Credit, Temari says under her breath, already writing the story for the morning. Yugito, she calls, voice carrying with no effort. Kumo's strike on a sanctifier foundry saves 3 border villages from unsafe scripture. Konoha is grateful for the hospitality and training in mountain etiquette. Yugito blinks. Naruto likes her enough by now to enjoy that. She bows not deeply, just enough for courtesy to say we heard you. Kumo thanks Konoha for the opportunity to host an accident, she says dryly. Also for the dog who bites people who deserve it. Garm, belly muddied, tail flag high, bears teeth. Anchovies, he says, for my sacrifice. Yugito looks at Naruto like a woman deciding whether to be friendly or respected and choosing yes. She reaches into a pouch and tosses him a tiny gold bead, stamped with a lightning sigil. Calm bead, she says. Short range on storm frequencies. Call if the sky moves wrong. He catches it with the stupid luck of people who are supposed to drop such gifts. You're going to get tired of me, he says. I'm already tired of you, she replies, then smiles. In a way I don't mind. For a heartbeat, peace is possible. The foundry collapses into Someth. That will be a cautionary tale for men who think faith will let them skip engineering. The rain softens, honest. Naruto's shoulder throbs where Aegis kissed him with a rod. Hinata's hand is warm. Anko looks light in the bones. Temari squints at the clouds like a weather report tried to flirt. Garm sneezes and tries to look dignified about it. Then the sky opens. It's not lightning. Lightning is rude. Lightning knocks. This is a crease in noon light that widens because it was told to. The rain shivers and then hangs like beads on invisible threads. The air loses a degree of forgiveness. Yuto feels his tallies freeze like coins dropped in ice water. Hinata's hand tightens on his sleeve. Yugito's head snaps up, Matabi's eyes briefly boring through. Temari swears quietly in a language that was taught to her fan. Anko shows her teeth in a way that has nothing to do with humor. Sanctifiers around the bowl of the ruined foundry kneel as if gravity has introduced itself with improved credentials. The ones that don't kneel learn how. Something steps through the crease. Amateru is not bright. Brightness would be a favor. He is clarity at a pitch that makes bones try to be rules. The heaven-bound oath writes itself along his arms in lines that don't glow so much as teach your eyes a new alphabet and then punish you for not being fluent. His face is a man's face. His eyes are a desi. Scion that believes in itself too much to doubt. He looks at Naruto, and the tether on Naruto's wrist goes tight as wire because somewhere in the shrine country Shien has half knelt, half risen, fingers digging into wood. No pact shall touch this world, Amateru says, not loud, not angry, just accurate in a way that wants to be law. Naruto's flame dies like a candle under a glass for one gasp, then gutters back because he is too rude to stay obedient. Kurama moves under the hell, a bass thrum like an animal that knows how to take a bite of something that forgot it was made of meat. Later, the storm had said. Now, the sky says. Naruto flicks the gold bead into his ear without looking away. Yugito, he says, voice steady because he will not give this thing the gift of his tremor. If you Don't want your god to write your house, help me make him read. Yugito's smile is a slow baring of teeth, not friendly, trustworthy. Matabi likes the taste of hubris, she says. Blue fire wakes along her hands, hotter than prayer, older than sunsteel. Hinata's palm hits Naruto's chest. Once, anchor. Shien's pain moves along the tether, not punishing, partnering. Tamari opens her fan one rib. Ank. O rolls her shoulders like a woman about to do something she will not be forgiven for and refuses to care. Ametaru lifts a hand. The mandate begins to write. Okay. Naruto says to the world that wants to be simpler than people. Let's argue. Chapter 4 end. Chapter 5. The Heavenbound Oath. The moment Ametaru speaks, the world tries to square itself. Rain stops midair like pearls on invisible strings. Sound thins to a single pure line. The Heavenbound Oath writes across the sky in strokes so tidy they feel like scolding. No pact shall touch this world, the god says, calm, like announcing weather. Naruto's black flame gutters, a candle under a cup. Then Kurama's heat breathes beneath it, old, contemptuous, alive, and the cup cracks hairline. The flame threads back, tight and mean. Hold me, Naruto says. And Hinata's palm finds his sternum so precisely his body obeys before his brain finishes the thought. The tether runs hot under his skin. On the far end, Shien's breath hitch steadies, bells in bones. Temari's fan opens one rib. Pick your angles, she murmurs. Don't swing at scripture. Fold it. Enko rolls her shoulders like a woman greeting an ex. Fine. Let's ruin a sermon. Yugito steps forward, blue fire blooming at her wrists. Matabi finds arrogance delicious, she says. We'll plate it up. Garm bares his teeth and grins with his eyes. If anyone dies, I'm keeping their snacks. Ametaru gestures as if straightening a sheet. The mandate descends, thin as glass and just as sure of itself. It doesn't push, it arranges. Chains slacken, seals sigh, contracts whine like dogs tied too long. Naruto raises the verdict brand and draws a line in air. Not judgment. A name. Boundary. The mandate touches it and sticks for a breath, confused like a coat snagged on a nail. Hinata, he says, and feels her answer in the way his ribs stop trying to open too far. Left, she whispers, Byakugan wide, seeing where rules have joints. There's a seam. Temari's wind slides into the T-seam with the courtesy of a fan set between a page and a hand. The line of law curls a fraction. Yugito's blue slips under it and scorches the underside, not heat, but clarity, burning the grease of conceit. The edict cracks, not broken. Not yet, it just admits it can. On the ground, white-robed sanctifiers kneel, foreheads pressed to mud stirred into order by rain that no longer falls. Their abbot stands, clean as a ledger. Kiyomori, you can tell it without introduction. The posture of a man who's sure he's right because he burned doubt for warmth long ago. He raises a rod like a polite accusation. Deliver the Hellbound, he calls, pleased that his mouth still makes sense. Enko Senbon slaps his beaded sleeve with an affectionate ting. Buy a new hymn, she suggests, and vanishes Saidua. YS into a current of people moving to not be killed today. Ametaru lowers his palm. The second line writes itself. All borrowed fire shall be unlit. Naruto's wrist prickles, tallies tightening like stitches. The flame wavers. He looks at his own hands and hates that they shake. He closes his fingers and, without theatrics, opens a door inside himself. The world tilts. The floor is water again, ankle cold. The bars rear, high and indifferent. Behind them, Kurama watches with a boredom that is mostly patience. Naruto doesn't waste words. I need a better grammar, he says. Kurama's mouth peels back, pleased. Stop trying to be a wall, he repeats. Let me be tide, you be river. Naruto smiles because he's scared and because it fits. Deal. He turns, and there's another door. Not bars. A hinge scraped raw. The signature he wrote in the Uzushio vault glows under his skin like ink in lemon heat. The Hellbound contract steps close, not as a scroll but as a shape, an old courthouse with teeth, a clever beast with a pen. Garm noses through the opening like a dog inviting himself onto the couch. He'll ask for something stupid, he warns, tail wagging despite himself. He always does. E thing in the doorway smiles with too many rules. Bearer, it says without sound. You come to beg, not for more power. Naruto says, breath steady. For new terms. The teeth tilt. Amusement is rare. Proceed. Naruto speaks the peace he's held in his chest since the shrine courtyard, right a protector's codicil. If I choose to stand for the living, let the pit stand for me, take the tithe as pain, not forfeiture. Not just mine, he adds, jaw hard, but anyone I shield. No shortcuts, no cheap kills. I carry the bill, you count honestly, I pay honestly, and you don't get to eat anyone for bookkeeping. Garm groans through his teeth. You had to make it expensive. The contract smile widens until it's a ledger balancing itself. And if the weight exceeds you. Hinata's hand through the tether, here. Shien's breath, standing. Temari's wind, angle. Yugito's heat, clean. Anko's laughter, knife. Kurama, quiet, fond against his will. I'm not alone, Naruto says, and feels the sting, that little cell. Punishment for saying easy things. Look for purchase and find none because this is not easy, it is true. The contract considers the world, and then the boy, and then the world as it is when the boy refuses to move. Agreed, it says. Delighted. Sign. There is no brush. There is a pain that feels like taking the sharp thing from someone else's hand and squeezing until blood slicks your fingers. Naruto doesn't flinch. Ink sears the bones of his wrist, weaving into the old tallies until the columns change. The marks no longer look like notches. They look like debts, and a place to settle them. He breathes out and stands on rock and rain again. The mandate falls. No pact shall decide for the living. Naruto answers, brand up, chains hissing as they hook empty air where consent should be and find purchase anyway. Read what you're writing over. His flame roars black and then steadies to a knife line. Hinata's fingers press behind his heart, and his body, traitor, beloved, remembers to share. Amederu's brows rise a fraction. The clean, merciless gaze notes the wrong kind of survival. You persist. I argue, Naruto says. Difference. The god lowers 2 fingers. A small mandate darts, not a sweeping law, a precise ordinance. Slip fast. This tether shall break. The cord along Naruto's wrist snaps. His bones ring. Shien gasps somewhere he can't see. Bells scream. Hey! Garm barks, furious. No cutting leashes without asking. Hinata's hand doesn't leave him. She slides to his forearm, finds another line, chakra to flesh, and tightens. Again, she says to Naruto and to Shien both. Make a new knot. On your count. Shien murmurs down the hollow bone tether that shouldn't exist and does now because they decide it does. 1. Hinata breathes. Naruto opens. Not big, just enough. 2. Hinata says. Shien's pain threads, light, exact. 3. Hinata finishes, and the tether splices, not as before. Better. Braided with a third strand that tastes like Kurama's laugh when he forgets to be bitter. Amederu watches a thing that should not be and lets no surprise touch his face. Perverse, he says softly. You bind against mandate. Mandates that ignore people are just graffiti, Temari says pleasantly. And folds a sweep of law with a gust that acts like a bookmark. Her second cut spares 2 kneeling sanctifiers and takes the rod from Kiyomori's hand, sending it skittering through mud. He stares at his empty fingers, scandalized at matter behaving like matter. Blasphemy, a sanctifier whispers. Daylight, Anko corrects, and appears behind him long enough to turn his collar so he faces the living village he kept pretending was a spreadsheet. Amederu gestures again, bored of humans explaining their day. The world reorganizes. A clean exclusion bubble pops into excess. Tense around Naruto, the way you put a glass over a moth. Inside, his fire sputters, dies. His chains sink like words in honey. Now, the god says, not unkind. Stay. Yugito moves first, not because she expects to win alone, but because she will not allow that sentence to hang unpunished. Blue flame rips across the bubble. It hisses, resists, gives a little, the way all rules do when faced with other old things. She bares teeth. He does not stay. She tells something older than she is. Wind, Temari says, and lifts, and the bubble pulls thin in one corner like a soap film where air insists. Hinata. Whole. Hinata can see it. A pinpoint where decree meets breath. She strikes the air there. 2 gentle flicks that make nothing happen, until Naruto steps into the nothing and discovers it's a door. He staggers out. His lungs drag in wet air like a man who swam too far under ice. He laughs once, stupid with gratitude. Thank you, he says to all of them and to himself. Amederu regards the lot, like a teacher grading a worksheet. Partial credit, careless defiance. Then he speaks another line. The words do not touch ears, they edit the map of the country. Biju chakra flickers across horizons like candles coughing. You can feel entire valleys flinch. Kurama rumbles under Naruto's ribs. He thinks we are stains on clean paper. Then we'll be ink, Naruto says, and throws chains, not at Amederu. Not at throats, but at the decrees themselves. Links hook calligraphy midair and drag sentences off true. He doesn't try to break them. He reformats them, bending the runtime so they choke on their own certainty. It hurts. Not heroically, idiotically. Each time he touches a mandate, the codicil exacts its tax, and he takes it. His hands go numb, then cold, then heavy. He keeps moving. When his knee wobbles, Hinata's palm steadies it without comment. When his breath goes thin, she thickens it along the tether and pays in a hiss she refuses to make aloud. When his vision cants, Tamari makes the horizon swerve back under his feet. When his courage snarls, Anko barks a joke mean enough to cut dread and kind enough to stitch it after. Enough, Amederu says, not angry. He lifts both hands, and the law rises. And this time the sentence is long. The earth shall forget contracts, the air shall reject bargains, the sky shall refuse names. Pick a smaller room, Naruto cuts in, and then does the stupid, necessary thing. He opens hell. Not wide, not the way villains do. A knuckle-sized gate pops at his shoulder and leans into the world like a judge peeking over a desk. The heat that sighs out isn't molestation. It's authority waiting to be earned. The shape behind it is a door, and a hallway, and a courtroom, and a beast that likes filing. King, Naruto says without bowing. The thing smiles with hospitality that bites. Bearer, you brought guests. Witness, Naruto says. He points at Amederu. He writes law over people. He points to the mud, to the captives, to the shinobi who Avenue decided their feet are enough of a hill. We answer with choice. You always did like that word, the king says. The gate sniffs at Amederu's mandate, amused. Heaven writes without consent. Hell keeps receipts. How novel to agree on something. Amederu stares at the gate as one might regard a moth, then at Naruto with a flick of disappointment that would make a lesser boy apologize for not being what he's told to be. You appeal to a pit. I negotiate with one, Naruto says. You issue orders. I collect promises. Promises fail, Amederu says. People fail, Naruto says, and the tally's his skin do not sting because there is no lie here, only a decision to keep paying. That's where meaning lives. The god sighs. It is almost sad. Your kindness is messy. So is weather, Tamari says. And cuts another edict into something more honest. Amederu comes then. Not striding, not vanishing and reappearing. Arriving, his footfalls rewriting the ground so each step is allowed by the paragraph beneath it. The oath burns along his arms. Sunsteel scriveners in the mud cry in relief. Kiyomori smiles like a father watching grammar scold a child. Naruto goes to meet him. They do not trade blows in the way boys want gods to. They do not throw mountains. They write and erase each other faster than fear can comment. When Amederu extends a calm hand and says be still, Naruto opens the bridge. And writes except when friends ask me to move, then steps because Hinata's fingers twitch a fraction. When Naruto flings chains at the oath itself, Amederu speaks unhook, and the links fall, so Naruto hooks intent instead. And Amederu falters for the length of one blink, because intent has to be earned every breath. Yugito's blue cuts through a ward that would have erased flame and leaves it cleaned of arrogance. Anko's knife finds the rod at Kiyomori's feet and boots it into the pool formed in a footprint, Sunsteel hissing, holy temper tantrum. Shien breathes down the line like a bell ringer pacing herself for midnight. Garm sinks his teeth into a dome of polite logic and refuses to let go. It isn't enough. Of course it isn't. Amederu writes larger. The bearer's heart shall yield. Naruto feels it, a slick hand inside his ribs, palming the will to open and squeezing. He does not fight that squeeze with force. He swaps hands, gives that heart to the tether. Hinata takes it. She doesn't say a vow. She says, stay, like she did not plan to ask but has trained all her life to do it well. Shion snarls a prayer that isn't one. The codicil bends. The pain moves. Tamari blows a sheet of raw. In between decree and flesh, and the sentence loses track of its object for a beat. Kurama laughs like a landslide that decided to be friendly. Naruto steps into the hole Hinata bought with her breath and burns, not the god. Not even the armor of scripture, but the heaven-bound script that crawls Amederu's arms. Obsidian fire licks, hungry for lies. Matabi's blue dances with it, burning the pride that lacquered decree to skin. The oath hisses. Words sear. Letters curl and lift and flee like dried lacquer under a bar of soap. Amederu stares at his own wrists, coolly, as if judging a student's mistake. Then he looks at Naruto. Surprised into honesty. You refuse to kill. Naruto's chest is a drum. The tallies in his arms are bright as welds. He smiles with all his teeth. You refuse to listen. They collide. Not bodies. Not chakra. Claims. Naruto brings up every ordinary thing he has learned to love and throws it like jutsu. Haruka's horse laugh over soup, chalk dust on a shirt, Temari's long suffering eye roll that is secretly fond, Anko's refusal to be defined by hands she no longer kisses, Hinata's palm keeping a boy alive in front of a crowd because she understands the difference between scandal and medicine. This is law, he says, and his voice cracks because he isn't trying to sound impressive anymore. He's trying to sound correct. Amederu falters again. He finds himself having to argue, not pronounce. His mouth tightens. A man condescended to, forced off his script. You cannot scale this. Naruto laughs because he has to. Then step down. He doesn't mean yield. He means walk among. He means an end to pulpit height. He lifts his hands and, stealing from Shion, from Hinata, from Tamari, braids a tether in the open air. It stretches from his wrist to Amederu's, not binding, offering. Live, he says. Brand bright, chains easy in his palms. Share the bill. Watch what we choose when we hurt and when we don't. If you still want to write over us after you've paid with us, I'll open the door myself. The god stares at the thread like looking at a new color and not wanting to admit it. The sanctifiers freeze as if any movement would break the moment. Kiyomori's lips part, a prayer stuck. Illegal, Amederu says, almost softly. Shion laughs hoarsely through the tether. Everything new is. Hinata's fingers are shaking against Naruto's arm and steady anyway. This is right, she whispers. Because sometimes law needs permission to be born. Kurama huffs. I will not say I'm proud, he says, but I will not insult us by pretending I am not entertained. Amederu lowers his eyes to the thread again. Then to the people around it. Not a crowd, not a church, just shinobi with rain in their hair, villagers with bad shoes and better stubbornness, a dog who is too ugly to be divine and therefore absolutely is. You will fail, Amederu says finally, and it isn't a curse, it's an observation, and kinder than it meant to be. Every day, Naruto says. Then we'll fix it. The god lifts his hand. For a breath Naruto thinks he will cut the thread. Amederu places 2 fingers against it instead. The tether settles. Not bright, not triumphant, a phrase written in the margins of an old book. The heaven-bound script flares once along Amederu's arms and then gutters to a clean, dull scar. He looks at his hands like a man surprised to see them dirty and deciding that this could be education. On the ground, Kiyomori makes a sound like a sentence turned back on itself. Blasphemy. He tries again, weaker. Anko's blade tips his rod a hair, not threatening. Humility, she suggests. The abbot's face breaks, not into tears, into room. A man who has burned doubt for fuel discovers he misses the warmth. Slowly, he lowers his head. A few sanctifiers sob the way furniture would if you taught it how. A few run. A few take off their rods and look at the empty hands as if they were always heavy. Amederu turns. No one binds him. That was never the point. He walks out of the crease. He tore in the rain resumes. First threads, then sheets, making everything honest. Naruto sways. The codicil collects its due and presents the bill all at once. He folds without drama, knees hitting mud he does not intend to memorize. His breath turns thin. He hears bells far away as if a room has decided to be considerate about pain. Hinata drops with him and catches his face in both hands. Stay, she says. Ordinary is tap water and entirely holy. I'm here. Pay then breathe. I'm here. He does. He hates how much he loves it. He loves it enough to hate it less. Shion sits down many valleys away and lets herself lie flat for 3 long breaths, staring at a ceiling beam she will learn to love for saving her vision. The tether slackens to a hum. Tamari reaches down and hauls Naruto up by the back of his jacket like a cat. Then does the same to Hinata with less roughness. Anko wipes her knife on Kiyomori's abandoned robe and tucks it away like putting away a prayer she intends to use later. Yugito watches the crease in the sky close and rolls her shoulders like a woman who will be sore tomorrow and satisfied about it. Garm lays his head on Naruto's knee with theatrical suffering. I don't want to say I helped, he says. But we both know I did. Anchovies. Naruto laughs and then wheezes because breathing is expensive. We'll get you a barrel. Gilded, Garm says. For morale. Kumo shinobi fan out. Professional and suddenly lighter. The captives from the foundry stumble into blankets and questions that begin with "Are you hurt?" and end with "Can you go home?" The sanctifiers, who stayed, tear down the sunsteel arch where it stands and stack the rods like fence posts. Kiyomori sits in mud. A child with a bowl of rice offers him a bite. He stares like he's never seen food in context before and then eats, careful. By night, the storm has sung itself hoarse. A relay squad from Konoha arrives with the speed of rumor and the survival rate of common sense. Tsunade's scroll, a real, boring, beautiful piece of paper, crosses hands with a Kumo writ, all stamps and signatures, joint denial of extrajudicial mandates across shared borders. Tamari writes a draft for Suna before bed because if she doesn't, some man will. She hands it to a runner with a look that means do not rewrite this to be less correct. Shion reaches the plateau at dawn, not hurrying, not moving slowly, Arav. Ing the way bells arrive, because you listened. She greets the foundry's wreck without pity. She touches the tether on Naruto's wrist and then his cheek with 2 fingers, clinician and friend. Don't die in my house, she reminds him, soft. Working on it, he croaks. Soup. Garm demands. Soup. Shion agrees. They sit on crates that used to believe they were important. Bowls steam. Matabi's BL. Yui warms Naruto's palms without touching them. Yugito is careful about burning boys she respects. Anko eats like she means it and looks like a woman who has stepped off a road she hated. Tamari is ALR. Edie planning trade routes through sky that no longer pretends to be court. Hinata leans her shoulder into Naruto's without making a ceremony of it. What did you give him? Tamari asks, after a time. Not what did you take. What did you give? My temper, Naruto says. My calendar. I told him to live long enough to be wrong. Cruel, Anko says approvingly. Necessary, Hinata says softly. Kiyomori approaches without robe or rod. He bows from the spine, not deep, precise. We will break our forges, he says, voice reassembled from parts that used to be sermon and are now trying to be conversation. Not because you forced us. Because I do not trust myself with them. Good start, Tamari says, and taps his shoulder with the fan as if knighting a hypothesis. He looks at Naruto, at Hinata, at Shion, at Yugito, at Anko. At the dog with standards. What are you? He asks, sincere, baffled, a man who has ridden people into boxes so long he forgot shapes. Trouble, Anko says. Neighbors, Tamari says. Students, Hinata says. Hungry, Garm says. Alive, Naruto says. Kiyomori nods. The word sits in his mouth like a coin he may one day spend rightly. Konoha receives them as if waking from a bad dream in which paper was king. The white ring over the fountain is gone. In its place is chalk dust that refuses to be swept, just to remind brooms about hubris. Tsunade signs things in stack. That mean people won't be disappeared under nice stationery. Shikamaru says. Troublesome, in a tone that means he's proud and needs a nap. Yugito walks the streets with them and collects 3 invitations to argue policy, 2 to fight. And 1 to tea. She accepts the tea. Tamari trades wind diagrams with a weaver who only understands half the shapes and invents 3 better. Anko stands in the M. Arcadon doesn't flinch when a child asks about her scars. She explains them as if discussing a route through the forest. Shion sits cross-legged beside the fountain and lets a novice draw her sleeve. Incorrectly until the lines feel right. Naruto and Hinata end up on the academy roof, because it's where the day goes when it wants to remember it was once a kid. The village hums. The sky is only sky. You didn't kill him, Hinata says. Not question. Accounting. I wanted to, Naruto says. For a second. Because it would be neat. He watches his hands where the tallies lie quiet like columns at balance because someone chose a fair math. I don't want neat. I want people. Hinata's mouth curves into the smallest, fiercest smile. Me too. They sit until the sun leans. Iruka finds them and puts a paper cup of cold tea between them as if officiating something with no words. He doesn't make a speech. He says, proud, and nobody pays the sting on that because truth makes new rules. When they climb down, Enko waylays them with a bag of anchovies for Garm and a look for Naruto that contains an apology he doesn't need and a promise he believes. Tamari tosses him a Suna ribbon she, exceed. Entali, left tied to his wrist because diplomacy works best when it looks like flirting and vice versa. Yugito smacks the gold bead on his ear and says, Storm Channel. Use it. Shion presses two fingers to his pulse and nods as if a metronome has learned a better song. At the gate, the last of the sanctifiers who chose to stay take off their white and keep only the work. Healing hands, good rope, honest words. Kiyomori walks with them to the road and does not bless them. He says, learn, which is better. Night rolls over Konoha soft and huge. Bells ring at Mizuhana once, not alarm, not toll, just proof. Naruto finds himself back at the Uzushio vault long after he should sleep. The chain-wreathed walls purr hello like a house forgiving a thief. The lacquer box he'd jammed out of sight the first night is scuffed where he left it. He kneels, pulls it free, and opens the scroll a thumb width. The ink lifts to greet him, old animal happy to see a boy who eats consequences for breakfast. The new codicil glows faintly over his name, a clause that reads like a dare. If the bearer stands for the living, hell stands for the bearer. He feels it settle and does not flinch. Footsteps scuff behind him. He doesn't turn. Hinata's presence is a careful heat at his shoulder. You never come back here alone, she says, as if asking him to agree to a policy he would have made for her. I'm not alone, he says. She breathes a laugh, and the vault agrees. He rewinds the scroll. He puts it back. He ties the rope. He sets both hands on the stone. If I start treating people like tally marks, he says to the room, to the ink, to himself. Burn me. Garm sneezes and shakes his head, anchovy breath night sweet. Kid, he says. We already did. Outside, the village murmurs. A wind crosshatches sky like handwriting that hasn't decided its slant. Somewhere far above, a god walks under weather and listens to boots on ordinary ground. He is learning how to be wrong. Naruto and Hinata walk home without ceremony. They split at a corner as if this were any other evening and wave small. Naruto touches the gold bead and hears thunder consider. He touches the tether scar and feels Bell's smile. He touches the tallies and feels nothing but room. Tomorrow will cost. It always does. Good. He has friends with wallets. Chapter 5 end. Chapter 6. The Law That Listens. The chalk dust ring above Konoha's fountain had been scrubbed a dozen times and still came back when the light slanted right, like a bruise refusing to be a story. Vendors set out dumplings. Kids chased each other between fruit stalls and shinobi boots, hollering names until the names landed. Naruto let the sound wash through him and felt the tallies under his skin tick contentedly, like an abacus counted by laughter. Anchovies, Garm said. A piece of fish skin stuck to his nose like a disastrous mustache. You've eaten 6, Naruto said, flicking the skin away. That's slander, Garm replied. Also correct. Hinata caught, up at the corner near the tailor who sold official-looking ribbons to unofficial people. She had a paper bag of bean cakes, steam fogging the fold. For you, she said, holding them out as if sharing counted more than eating. He took one and burned his tongue in a way that felt like a normal day. How's the clinic? We had 3 sprains and 2 sores pretending to be curses, she said. Also 1. Boy who swallowed a beetle to impress a girl. Effective, Garm said. I would have married him on the spot. Hinata smiled at the dog, which Garm pretended not to enjoy. She glanced past Naruto, pupils narrowing, then widening sharply. Naruto, look. Across the street, a little girl with a red ribbon stood on tiptoe at a game stall and fumbled at the tag pinned to her shirt. She'd written her aim in careful block strokes an hour ago, proud enough to show everyone. Now the ink looked rubbed with water. The letters thinned as they watched, then slipped away altogether, as if the cloth remembered being blank and preferred it. The girl blinked. Her hand went to her chest, looking for a weight that wasn't there. Mama, she called, then stopped, uncertain, as if the word didn't fit her teeth for a second. Naruto's tallies thrummed low, not pain, wrongness. Enko touched down from a roof without pretending she'd walked. Her hair blew in a breeze that had the polite manners of nothing and the taste of something. Smell that? She asked, serious as a punch. Paper in clean water. That's Sunsteel's favorite soup. Tamari arrived with the kind of timing that either meant she had been near. Buyer Wind did her favors when she was bored. She lifted her chin toward the market's far end, where shadows bled differently. Not from the sky, she said. Underground. And it's not a ward. It's erasure. Hinata's Byakugan bloomed, soft and exact. She blinked twice, dizzy with how her sight didn't want to hold the thing it saw. There's a bell, she whispered. No. Something shaped like one. In the sewers by the old aqueduct. The sound doesn't travel in air. Her fingers brushed Naruto's sleeve in apology for how much she was about to ask. It travels in names. Garm's hackles went up so fast he looked like a badly groomed mop. Rude, he said. Who deletes snacks without asking? Sanctifiers. Naruto asked, throat dry. Temari's mouth tilted. If not, then they're cousins who think mercy is making people forget they hurt. Enko's smile flicked on and off like a broken light. Let's go ruin a bell. They went quiet and fast, down into the part of Konoha that had been built by people who expected the ground to argue with them. The aqueduct tunnel was high enough to make sound say things to itself. The smell of old water and iron and chalk sat in the tongue. Hinata led, pupils wide, measuring the walls like they might lie. Enko took the rear with her hands where she could see them. Garm trotted, disdain and caution in equal measure. Tamari didn't open her fan. She didn't need to. The air told her what it had been told to do. At a bend where the brick had learned to accept moss like a lesson it didn't mind repeating, Hinata lifted her palm. The sound shifted, ringing, faint, the memory of a spoon tapped against a glass at a wedding. Naruto felt his name float in his mouth, almost light enough to drop. They turned the corner and saw it, a bell made of plates and script. Sunsteel shaved thin and lacquered with tidy prayers, hanging over a circle of water that didn't ripple. The bell didn't move on its hook. It rode itself into the air with each hum, a sound that erased as it traveled. 3 figures in white work garb stood under the bell. No robes, no rods. Their faces were bare and devout. The one at the center held a mallet. Not raised. Ready. Don't, Naruto said, and the man looked up and smiled with a kind sadness that made Naruto want to be unkind on purpose. Brother Saisui, the man said, as if introducing himself to a classroom. We aren't your enemies. We're here to take knives from children. Enko lifted a senbon an inch and set it down again. Honest question, she said carefully. Who told you that's what you're doing? Saisui dipped his head. People who bled themselves to sleep and would not have if a kinder world had been cut for them. After you saw him, his eyes flicked to Naruto. The look wasn't contempt, it was terrible loyalty repurposed. After you taught our Lord to step down, some of us were given permission to decide how to live. Many chose to build, some of us chose to unbuild. Tamari tilted her face to the bell and listened with more than ear. You ring it, she said, and it takes names from the surface world. People don't follow lines, lines won't hold them. Names do. They hold, Saisui agreed. They trap, they make debts stay debts. Take away the lines and all that weight falls into grass. The world gets to forget its guilt. Hinata's breath hitched. At whose cost? Saisui's smile didn't change. At no one's. That's the mercy. If your village cannot call you what you were, it cannot hold you to the harm. If you cannot say, Naruto, He is just a boy again. He lifted the mallet just enough to count as a threat. A boy free of all he's promised to pay. Naruto's mark stung. Not because Saisui lied, but because he did not. This was temptation built like logic. He felt his name in his mouth again and tasted how easy it would be to let it go. No tallies. No ledger. Freedom by subtraction. Hinata moved, infinitesimally. Her hand found his and closed around it in a grip that wasn't showy. I knew you before I could say it, she whispered. And the sting slid off her voice as if the bell had met something it couldn't unwrite. Anko's eyes went soft and mean. Kid, she said lightly to Saisui, though he wasn't a kid. Erasing me doesn't save me. It just makes it harder to fix what I broke. Saisui's gaze didn't flinch from that. You love your scars, he said, genuinely puzzled. We mean to love what you could be without them. Love me with them, Anko snapped. Or don't waste the word. Naruto stepped forward until he could see his face bent in the water's ridiculous mirror. His flame didn't come. It wasn't a fight for flame. He lifted his hand and pulled up the verdict brand, careful, slow, writing a mark on the air in front of Saisui that wasn't a judgment. It was a name for what the man thought he was doing. Mercy by subtraction. Saisui flinched, just a flicker. His fingers tightened on the mallet. You've paid enough, he said, convinced. Let me take the book out of your hands. Temari's voice was very mild. Books burn, she said. People remember, even when it hurts, especially then. She turned her head a little, listening to drafts that didn't exist. Hinata, the joint, she murmured. The bell's weak at the hook. We can drop it. Hinata shook her head once. If it falls, the sound will ring wide. It will erase a street. We take it outside, Anko suggested. Garm snorted. And erase a district. Do you often remove beehives with explosives? Naruto looked at Saisui, at the tenderness that had turned into a club. I don't want to fight you, he said. You don't have to, Saisui said, gentle. Just step back and let the world be quiet for once. Naruto breathed. The tether hummed against his wrist, Shien's pulse insistently normal. He thought of a boy in a RKET with his name wearing off in daylight. He thought of bills stacked neat and high, of choosing to pay because that's what made the soup taste like more than water. Okay, he said, and the word landed like a coin in a cup. Ring it, Naruto, Hinata said, alarm and trust in the same breath. Ring it, he told Saisui again. But listen, Saisui did. The mallet touched the side of the bell. The hum lifted. Thin, cutting, sweet, wrong. Naruto felt his name slide to the edge of his teeth and wobble. He saw, for a second, Uruka turn on a street and blink because a boy's face meant nothing but warmth and stupidity and lunch. He saw Garm bristle at a stranger with his smell. He saw himself unhooked from the village like a loose nail, nothing to hang on. He pulled the gate open at his shoulder, not a corridor this time, not court. A window. On the other side, darkness arranged itself into a desk. The king set down a pen. Busy, the king observed. Always, Naruto said. He held up his wrist. The new codicil glowed faintly. Law trying to breathe. We made a rule about paying for people. We need one about keeping them. Hell's smile deepened. Names are not contracts. They're invitations. They don't belong to me. Good, Naruto said. We'll write a civic one. Saisui's head jerked, sensing the wrong gravity if not the cause. What are you doing? Paperwork, Naruto said. He looked at Hinata. She didn't nod. She didn't have to. He turned back to the bell and, without lighting flame, spoke. Uzumaki Naruto. The bell tried to take it. The word caught on the mark in the air, on the tether. On the bones of a boy who had screamed it into night enough times to make it stubborn. Uzumaki Naruto, he said again, then lowered his voice. Naruto. Hinata stepped in and said it too. Quiet, not a declaration, a practice. Temari said it once, deadpan, like reading a wind chart aloud. Anko said it like she was making fun and made the fun mean stay. Garm barked it. The king of hell sighed as if children were messy. Then leaned over the desk. Very well. He dipped the pen. Registry. Naruto felt something drape itself across the bell's hum. A ledger not for debts but for names, a book with 1,000 blank lines and a promise at the top. Spoken freely, kept fiercely. The codicil throbbed along his wrist. Pain bit. Sharp. Necessary. It ate the part of the hum it needed to make room for the new law. Naruto swayed. Hinata's hand caught his elbow and then left, not to steady too much ego. Stop, Saisui said, alarm waking like a man whose house he set on fire to keep warm. You're counting names. That's a counting sin. No, Naruto said. His chest hurt like he'd laughed too long. Accounting love. Tamari lifted her fan. Word choice matters, she told Saisui. Try it. Saisui looked at the bell, at the water, at the boy, at the ink of a world that had just learned to write a thing it hadn't needed when it was simpler and worse. The mallet dipped. His eyes stung and he looked furious at himself for it. If I ring it again, he said, testing, can you keep them? No, Naruto said, not all, not forever. I'm not a god. He grinned with all his teeth. I have friends. Enko rolled her eyes, which was her way of blushing. Hinata's mouth made the smallest line and softened. Garm wagged once and pretended not to. On the far side of the window, the king wrote names he had no business keeping and did it with pleasure because the rules had changed and he loved a tidy ledger. Destroy it, Hinata said gently, chin tipping toward the bell. Together, Naruto answered. It was delicate work. Enko threaded wires where joints pretended not to be. Hinata tapped twice, then once, closing the paths that would have made the bell sing while it died. Tamari laid wind along the sea, so the weight would go where it wouldn't bruise. Naruto opened a small gate under the hook and let the hook pass into an elsewhere that wasn't hungry. Garm peed on Sunsteel because some rituals are necessary. The bell came down like a secret put back in a box carefully enough to make it a promise instead of a weapon. The hum thinned and then quit. In the market, a little girl looked down and foo. ND that the ribbon at her neck remembered her name as if it had been embarrassed to forget. Saisui let the mallet drop. It struck the stone with a harmless knock. He stared at his hands. I thought I was helping, he said. And he wasn't asking for absolution, he was asking to be told he hadn't ruined everything. You didn't, Naruto said. You tried to carry pain with silence. We're trying with noise. He looked up at the others and then back at Saisui. Come outside. Help us save people again. Saisui's mouth trembled. He nodded once. Yes, he whispered. Yes. They hauled the disassembled place. Atesh out of the aqueduct like a funeral and a festival at once. Konoha wasn't kind to white robes for a breath and then decided it could be, because this wasn't church anymore, it was work. Children are, and alongside the procession and shouted names for the sport of it. Adults took the cue and shouted names of shops and lanes and lovers no one had announced yet. Tamari cheated and directed when to carry them farther. Hinata laughed, quiet and fierce. Enko bought rice balls and pretended she hadn't given them away. Naruto said, Baruka, too many times and watched the man go flustered in the middle of the street. As the plates were stacked in a yard where iron went to learn humility, Thunder muttered up country, a familiar voice clearing itself before a speech. The gold bead warmed against Naruto's ear. You ring? Yugito asked. Dry amusement draped over fatigue. We broke a bell, Naruto said. Good, she said. I hate bells. Come for soup, Hinata said, as if the channel were hers. There was a pause, and Naruto could hear Yugito's smile as if it moved wind. On my way, she said. Somewhere a storm changed routes to visit a village instead of punishing a ridge. Afternoon slid toward a soft dusk. Shion reached the fountain with a novice in tow and a paper bag of herbs and the look of someone who had taken a nap standing up. She didn't ask what had happened. She read the names on faces. And the absence of the hum and the way the chalk ring refused to come back in the last of the light. She went to Saisui and touched his wrist 2 fingers, a clinician taking a pulse and a priest offering a bench. You will help feed, she told him, and you will not apologize more than twice because it wastes bowls. Yes, priestess, he said, like a boy glad to be told to clean a yard. Amateru stood at the very edge of the crowd. So quiet he was nearly respectable. Not bright, clear. The Heavenbound script on his forearms had faded to scars that looked like rules learned the hard way. He watched. Head names move like a current and did not touch it. Naruto met his eye and inclined his head in a way that wasn't deference. Amateru nodded back in a way that wasn't dismissal. Neither of them spoke. Sometimes law needs silence to hear itself. Night came properly. The registry in Naruto's bones stopped humming like a song and settled like a tool put away sharp. The tallies in his arms glowed faint. When he flexed his hands and didn't argue with him for smiling too much. On the academy roof, where stories went to breathe, he sat with Hinata while lanterns bloomed along the streets and then were snuffed by hands that would relight them in the morning. Garm sprawled across both their feet, snoring like a man who had forgiven himself for being ugly. Do you ever worry? Naruto asked, that on E-day I'm going to sign something and forget how to make it kind. Hinata didn't look at him. She looked at the village with a softness that was not forgiveness, it was insistence. No, she said, I worry that you'll try to be kind alone. He nodded. The movement felt like turning a page he wanted to reread and deciding to keep going anyway. So, he said, tomorrow we get yelled at by Tsunade for unauthorized paperwork with Hell. Feed a contrite cultist, write wind contracts with Tamari, and make Garm believe anchovies aren't currency. Impossible, Garm said in his sleep, and wagged exactly once. Hinata's shoulder touched his for the length of 2 heartbeats and then moved away so he wouldn't think affection was a cage. Good plan, she said. Down in the shrine country, Shion wrote one line into her own book and then closed it, content with an entry that simply read, today, people said each other. It worked. Up in the storm country, Yugito stood on a lightning-washed ledge and listened. Ned to the sky try out its new habit of not writing over everything. Matabi purred blue and warm. Try living, Yugito told the night. It's loud. In a small room where rods leaned without anyone blessing them, Kiyomori traced a scar with a finger and wondered how to pray without giving orders. He decided to start by picking up trash. And in a vault where chains liked jokes, a lacquer box sat quietly in the dark. If anyone had been there, they would have heard a very faint sound, like a ledger chuckling. Naruto stood, bones complaining and happy, and offered Hinata a hand down from the parapet she didn't need. She took it anyway. They climbed into the hum of a village that had learned a new word. It wasn't purify, it was keep. Chapter 6 End.